but I need to do a couple things first. First up, let's see, we'll get the chat going. So, restream. Restream chat. All right. Howdy. Okay, so I'm going to read something that Danger Dead Nettle sent to me just to get us started. So let's see. Dead Nettles. Wild humans. Okay. Just to get us started. Well, actually, maybe I should draw first because I don't think there's anybody actually watching yet. Let's see. How can I tell? Oh, there is somebody here. Benarubber. Howdy, McDo. All right. Well, Benarubber, since there is somebody around to hear, I will read this thing from Dead Nettles. Here we go. The Sapiens Curriculum. Freeing Ourselves. Wild body, wild spirit. Society tames the wolf into a dog, and man is the most domesticated animal of all. In a nutshell, the last 10,000 years has been a story of agriculture and domestication. First it was plants, then selected animals, and finally people themselves. Plants were relatively easy, and the non-human animals took some work, but people turned out to be a real challenge. It took thousands of years to bring wild people to heel, but today many of us have become willing, sometimes even eager participants in our own domestication. If this had happened all at once, we would have noticed it immediately and rebelled, but once again, it's the story of the frog in the warming water. First we agree to wear clothing and shoes, then we agree to do the chores, attend school, and balance our checkbooks. We learn to be responsible and complete our tasks on time. We follow directions, and by the time we finish with college, we're passive, compliant, and non-resistant, ideal subjects for life in a corporate world where obedience is paramount. At this point, the domestication is complete, and our lives as wild animals are over. So it's no surprise that we're suffering. We try to regain our health through all manner of substances and lifestyle tweaks, but we miss the larger point. That is, health is intimately tied to our original state of wildness. We might even say that wildness is health. The problem of domestication is that it systematically devitalizes the human spirit as it sucks the life out of the human animal. Domestication holds out the promise of wealth, security, power, and comfort, all at the cost of our animal vitality, our spirit, and vigility. What is vigility? I don't even know that word. The ability of an organism to move about freely and migrate. Huh. All right. Sweet. Where'd I leave off? Well, the problem of domestication is that it systematically devitalizes the human spirit as it sucks the life out of the human animal. Domestication holds out the promise of wealth, security, power, and comfort, all at the cost of our animal vitality, our spirit, and vigility. On the face of it, it might sound like a good deal, but for most of us, it's a false promise, and for many, a lose-lose proposition. Wildness isn't just normal for the human animal, it's deeply embedded in every cell. The problem with wildness in the modern world is that it's hugely inconvenient. The problem with wildness in the modern world is that it's a hugely inconvenient reality. Wildness disrupts the modern social order, reduces efficiency, and inhibits productivity. It makes us poor consumers and threatens the bottom line. It's no wonder that corporate wellness programs embrace relaxation, mindfulness, and similar practices, but never encourage participants to embrace their animal nature. It's all health and wellness, never health and wildness. In short, wildness is a threat to culture as usual. It's a revolutionary spirit. It resists incarceration of any sort, whether physical, spiritual, economic, or cognitive. It mistrusts pigeonholes, taxonomies, and human-created structures. Most of all, it distrusts social hierarchy and pyramid-shaped organizations. Wildness remembers its origins, and when threatened, it fights back. The domestication curriculum. Children are born wild, and, if all goes well, retain that spirit throughout their lives. But of course, we try to train it out of them. More or less intentionally, modern schools are designed to quash wildness and replace it with compliance. Learning is mostly beside the point. Good students sit still and do what they're told. Students with high energy and physical curiosity are accused of acting out and tagged with all manner of diagnostic labels, most of which have no medical basis whatsoever. If you act wild, which is to say normal, we'll medicate you, and if that fails, we'll kick you out of the tribe. In our modern opinion, wildness is deviant. Naturally, this entire enterprise is doomed to fail. Wildness isn't just normal for the human animal, it's deeply embedded in every cell in every student's body. The young student has the entire history of the biosphere running through her body and the very same energy that pulses through every lion, tiger, and bear on the planet. Every fish, every bird, every microbe. It's a fool's quest to try and repress this. Even if we succeed in the short term, the long-term blowback is catastrophic. Epidemics of depression, anxiety, unhappiness, and suicide. This is what happens when animals are denied a chance to be who they are. The problem with domestication is that it leads us toward resignation and defeatism. Warning signs. So how do we know if we've been duped into domestication? Warning signs include passive acceptance of the cultural and social status quo. Resignation. There's nothing we can do. Your dreams, passions, and values aren't your own, but are produced and handed to you by marketing departments. You reflexively go along to get along, even when your gut tells you to fight back. Your sense of identity and purpose are diffuse, weak, and vague. Depression nags at your soul. You'd like to follow your own path, but you don't dare rock the boat. Recovery. For most of us in the modern world, our wildness is endangered. Our health is suffering, and our spirits are weak. Many of us are content to accept this as our lot in life, and we visit all manner of health practitioners to set things right. But when we view it from a big history perspective, we remember who we are and what we used to be. And now, some of us are inclined to say, I'm in recovery from domestication. And so the question becomes, how do we retain and regain our wildness in a world that does everything possible to make it go away? The obvious place to begin is our physicality. When we're wild, we can feel the vitality coursing through our bodies, and we refresh that feeling with regular sessions of vigorous movement. But sadly, the modern fitness industry misses the point. The industry promotes physical movement, but labels it exercise, something that we're supposed to do to get in shape. At no point is there an attempt to connect the practice of movement with human or biological history. In one of the greatest ironies of the modern age, it seems that the fitness industry itself has become domesticated. But while physicality is a necessary element of wildness, it's not enough to revive and sustain our spirit. To keep our wildness alive, we've got to act at every opportunity and at every level. Curiosity is a great starting point, and question asking is a powerful path. Don't be content with the conventional boilerplate explanations. Don't just accept the standard methods or practices. Dig, explore, take charge of your education. Likewise, resistance and activism are vital. Speaking truth to power is a pure expression of our wildness. Risking for change refreshes and revives our spirits. The problem with domestication is that it leads us toward resignation and defeatism. Beaten down by the modern world, we conclude that there's nothing that can be done. But not only is it possible to live with wildness, we can actually use it to our advantage. Wildness doesn't just make us better animals, it can also make us better people and better citizens. Wildness doesn't turn you into a criminal or an outlaw, it turns you into an activist or a leader. It's perfectly possible to live in the modern world and still keep one foot in the paleo. We do this by way of memory, identity, and affiliation. Remember your deep history and your ancestry as a wild outdoor animal. Remember your outrageous strength and adaptability. Who do you identify with? The dog or the wolf? The horse or the zebra? The common sheep or the mountain goat? The wild animals of the world are your people, your team, your tribe, your soul. Your soulmates. Think think of them often. Wildness is about health, but it's really about a lot more than that. Your wildness keeps your body strong, but it also keeps us strong and contributes to a functional future. As it stands, we are in grave danger of ever more domestication, more robotic humanity, more passivity. And this, even beyond the rampant destruction of the biosphere, is a future that's unacceptable, a future that no self-respecting animal would want to live in. In other words, your wildness is vital for all of us. Keep it alive. Whoops. Tensegrity. All have their worth, and each contributes to the worth of the others. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Silmarillion. Integrity is the essence of everything successful. R. Buckminster Fuller. It might seem obvious, but if you want to understand and work with complex systems like human bodies and ecosystems, it's essential to look at the whole thing. Fragments can be interesting and important, but it's how they relate to one another that makes the difference in what we ultimately care about: total system function. This is precisely what we see in the world of physical training, where today's coaches and trainers are quick to emphasize whole-body integration and coordination. As they see it, strength, power, and injury resistance come from orchestration and integration of the entire system in motion, not isolation. The body's neuromuscular system is a lot more than just a bunch of muscles, joints, and nerves. It's a tensegrity structure. That is, all the skeletal and soft tissue elements participate in carrying the loads of gravity and producing movement. As with everything in nature, it's interdependent. Loads are, or should be, distributed across the body. In this paradigm, individual muscles are not considered particularly interesting. Rather, the idea is to engage kinetic chains, combinations of muscles and neural circuits that produce movement. By learning to orchestrate these chains, our movements become more graceful, powerful, and effective. This is the path to athleticism and injury resistance. In practice, coaches often use these cues to help their athletes focus on orchestration and integration. Hips talk to shoulders, lift the weight with your whole body, bend your knees, and of course the classic, toenails to fingernails. Complex systems. We see a similar theme in all complex systems. From bodies to ecosystems, this is why the bicycle wheel is such an ideal metaphor. When the system has lots of spokes of roughly equal length, tension, and strength, all is well, and the wheel rolls true. But if you lose more than a few spokes, muscles, or species, the structure becomes weak, then unstable. At this point, all it takes is a minor insult or injury for the entire system to collapse. Which, of course, is precisely where we stand on our planet today. The loss of biodiversity and cultural diversity is the equivalent of losing spokes in our bicycle wheel. In turn, the wheel begins to wobble, which increases our stress, our fear, and our anxiety for the future. We know that something is desperately wrong with the system, the structure, and the modern world, but we're not sure precisely what. Some spokes are too short, some are too long, and some are completely missing. In our fear, we keep tightening the remaining spokes, but it makes matters worse. Let's see. What was my phone telling me just there? Free up space? Okay. All right. In turn, the wheel begins to wobble, which increases our stress, our fear, and our anxiety for the future. Whole part whole. But how exactly does a master wheelsmith correct the imbalances in a wobbly wheel? It's an art that takes years to master, but the basics are pretty easy to understand. The first and most important lesson should be obvious, but often escapes our attention. That is, focus on the totality of the wheel. Examine the whole wheel first and see how it behaves on the stand. Give it a spin and look for wobbles, left, right, and up, down. Take your time, watch closely, and try to take in the whole thing. Then take your best guess as to the offending spokes. Something is broken, something is short, something is weak. Use your best judgment, pick out the offending spoke, and give the wrench a turn. But of course, this action, simple as it may seem, doesn't just adjust the spoke in question, it also affects the totality of the structure. So, you must go back to the whole and recheck the wobble. Has it gotten better or worse? Has it shifted in one direction or another? Are you adjusting in the right direction? This process of oscillating attention is the key to success. Athletic coach Vern Gambetta has called the whole part whole method of athletic evaluation. Watch the whole athlete in motion, then focus on the offending limb or joint, apply some kind of treatment or therapy, then return your attention to the whole athlete in motion. It's a great method, but this is about a lot more than rehabbing creaky athletes. The pattern is ideal for making adjustments in any complex system. Our problem, of course, is that we simply aren't trained to work this way. On the contrary, we're taught to focus on the condition of individual spokes. We're trained to become spoke specialists, and we get rewarded if our particular spoke specialty works as desired. Sometimes we get lucky, and our approach actually gives a solid, whole-wheel outcome, but more often this spoke-by-spoke approach fails to give us what we seek. An army of spoke specialists doesn't see the big picture. In fact, we're often actively discouraged from looking at bigger pictures. The rewards go to the experts, those who keep their eyes on individual spokes. This is particularly obvious in the domain of modern medicine, where each of the body's spokes has its own specialist practitioners, facilities, and professional organizations. Every organ, every tissue type, and every condition, every spoke gets intensive attention, while the whole goes mostly ignored. What we really need are students and professionals who are adept in the whole-part-whole oscillations. We need people with fluid intelligence and the ability to zoom in and zoom out, constantly comparing their work and adjustments against the totality of the system. To put it another way, we need the training and ability to move easily from big pictures to small and back again, over and over continuously throughout life. This is something native and indigenous peoples seem to understand intuitively, and in fact, it's built into their cultures and value systems. A person might specialize lightly and become a good hunter or a good warrior, but the holistic perspective is implicit and assumed by everyone. Young people are taught to ask, how will my action or behavior affect the totality of the tribe in context? But such is not the case in our narcissistic modern culture. For us, it's very much the inverse. We're actively rewarded for focusing intently on ourselves, especially our personal athletic or career performance. For the modern athlete or career professional, it's all about my spoke and my career. Who cares what effect it has on the totality of the wheel? That's not part of my job description. And besides, if I back off on my intensity, one of the other spokes might get ahead. Obviously, this is not a prescription for systemic health or sapience. It's no wonder our wheel is so wobbly. Fortunately, a more sophisticated understanding of wheelcraft seems to come with age and expertise. The master craftsman in any discipline has an expanded view of the totality and is inherently suspicious of any single movement, action, or point of view. He or she is cautious and patient, always scanning and looking for ripple effects that cascade through the system. Watch and listen, then turn a spoke just a little, then wait to see the systemic consequences. No individual action or element is good in and of itself. It's how it affects the whole that really matters. The message is obvious. Treat your life, your community, and your culture like a wheel. Take care of all the spokes and adjust continuously. If something's short, lengthen it. If something's weak, strengthen it. If something's dormant, wake it up. If something's hyperactive, calm it down. And whatever you do, keep your eye on the whole. All right, that's the end of it. So, weird transition there. I think, it's talking so much about living wildly or culturing your, protecting your wildness. And then once we get to this tensegrity section, I don't think the word wild or wildness appears again. Interesting. Anyway, Danny Dead Nettles sent that to me. Let's see if Dead Nettles is here in the chat. Yes, he is. Hey, Dead Nettles. Okay, so I just read your whole thing there. Do you have any comments on it? Anything you want to say? Anything you want to point out? And while you consider that, I'll look back. What do we got here? Ted Kaczynski flavored, Sub-Wild for Liberty. We have the history of the biosphere running through us. I like that. Hey, Parker. Greetings. The apostrophe for the G made the word possessive. Conundrum. Nice analogy with the bicycle wheel there. You need a truing stand for actual bike wheels. This is very up the yin-yang of my friend Tim Saxauer. His podcasts Muse Ecology gets at this a little, but he's still sorting through his thoughts on the topic. Okay, Muse Ecology Podcast. Let's open yet another tab. Nope. Apparently I did not copy. So Muse Ecology Podcast. All right. Spoke specialization reminds me of Aldo Leopold, using the analogy of ecology/reality operating like an orchestra, but scientists blind themselves to the whole piece by focusing on one instrument. The mainstream media narrative is about clamping down on the populist, riotous Trump supporters. There was also a very populist moment against police brutality this summer. Yeah, true that. I guess I'm having trouble getting hold of the whole concept of wildness. Like, I know I had it in abundance when I was young, and I was anti-establishment, anti-mainstream, just reflexively resistant to the big program from the get-go, which caused me to sabotage my prospects, within the domesticated ecosystem. And now that I'm in my 50s, and I don't know if it's the same as wildness, but my angry young man energy and my malcontent, iconoclast energy has ebbed. I'm more amenable to getting the most out of this domesticated ecosphere. Right, wildness is difficult to measure. I read Alfred Crosby's book on quantification. Western culture is said to have a fetish to conflate measuring/quantifying with controlling it. Well, that's, kind of part and parcel of the whole scientific method, and the technology that we derive from it is isolating things, controlling for variables, and, formulating relationships that we can describe as laws, or at least as chains of cause and effect, but it all comes from isolating. It's not a holistic approach. So the reductionism and the looking at things in isolation, it gives us great power. But if we obsess over that, and if we lose our ability to look at things holistically, or to get a feeling of gestalt from a whole system, then we can't pop back and forth. We can't do that movement of isolate, then move to the holistic and then isolate again. Or what was the exact phrase? I've already closed it, haven't I? Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, it's gone. Okay, never mind. All right. Transitioning into grumpy old man energy. I was before I started TRT. And now that my gym has been closed for like 5 weeks, almost. What is today? The 13th. It has been closed for 5 weeks. And I don't have whole body exertion. I don't have squats. I don't have deadlifts in my life anymore. I notice the brain fog is closing in hard. Like I've really lost mental clarity in the last few weeks. Okay, there was one other thing that somebody sent me that I wanted to read. So let's pop back to my email. I think it was from Bob Brown. Yeah, from Peak Prosperity. Okay, so this was posted yesterday. It's by Adam Taggart. David Cullum's Verbal Year in Review Synopsis. Oh, It's a video, and it's an hour and a half. Yeah, and it belongs to Peak Prosperity. I dare not play it here. So I thought that was something to read. In fact, it's something to listen to. Let's see. All right. I actually shouldn't be looking at my email on the stream because I'm displaying people's private email addresses. So we'll stop that. And, well, I guess before I move on, since I'm kind of in a reading mood, if anybody else has anything you'd like me to read, let me know. I'm of a mind to do it. This is why I've enjoyed getting into your podcast. The past year has worn off my iconoclastic young whip-snapping tendencies. Reading more and more history has calmed my idealism. Yeah. I actually found that David Cullen blog yesterday. So there is a blog. Let's see. There's a blog I can read, a video I cannot play. A podcast I cannot play here. Here's David on Twitter. I'm already following him. Okay. Here we are. There She Blows. 2020 year in review. All right. Imagine, if you will, a man wakes up from a year-long induced coma, a long hauler of a higher order, to a world gone mad. During his slumber, the President of the United States was impeached for colluding with the Russians using a dossier prepared by his political opponents, themselves colluding with the FBI, intelligence agencies, and the Russians. A pandemic that may have emanated from a Chinese virology laboratory swept the globe, killing millions, and is still on the loose. A controlled demolition of the global economy forced hundreds of millions into unemployment in a matter of weeks. Metropolitan hotels plummeted to a 10% occupancy, and the 10% of the global economy corresponding to hospitality and tourism has been smashed on the shoals and was foundering. The Federal Reserve has been buying junk corporate bonds in total desperation. A social movement of monumental proportions swept the U.S. and the world, triggering months of rioting and looting, while mayors, frozen in the headlights, were unable to fathom an appropriate response. The rise of neo-Marxism on college campuses and beyond had become palpable. The most contentious election in U.S. history pitted the undeniably polarizing and irascible Donald Trump against the DNC A-team, including a 76-year-old showing early signs of dementia, paired with a sassy neo-Marxist grifter with an undetectable moral compass. Many have lost faith in the fairness of the election as challenges hit the courts. Peering through the virus-induced brain fog, the man sees CNBC playing on the TV with the scrolling chyron stating S&P up 12% year-to-date, NASDAQ soars 36%. The man has entered the twilight zone. Okay, I'm going to pause there and just say I'm no fan of Kamala Harris, but I don't see her as a neo-Marxist. I see her as somebody willing to mouth whatever platitude she thinks will serve her in the moment. So I don't see her as a dedicated leftist of any sort. All right. A nutty chem prof from Cornell has interesting stories to tell. The year 2020 had crazy aplenty. 'Twas a year that was crafted in hell. What do we got here? The Dow's best week since 1938. More than 16 million Americans have lost jobs in 3 weeks. This is awesome. Look at this. So this is Jim Cramer, Mr. Moneyman. I think it's Jim Cramer. Anyway. New overnight, fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting. So look at the fires raging and the burnt out vehicles. Fiery, but mostly peaceful. Figure 2, largely peaceful protester meme at its inception. Putting ideas on paper is the best way to organize them in one place, and getting everything in one place is essential to understanding ideas as more than the gut reactions they often hide as. Morgan Housel, columnist on Why We Write. Every year I ponder not writing a review. One of the voices in my head was pleading with me. Don't write it. There is nothing to be gained. A much louder voice that chimes in seconds before every major decision that I make, however, was saying, fuck it, let's do it. Someday, I may drop the mic, but not yet. I personally benefit because my life's experiences and observations, those wild moments and funny-assed one-liners, don't get shoved down or up the memory hole. I get boluses? I don't know that word. I get boluses of serotonin. All right. You smart folk, you can roll your eyes as I look up definitions. A small rounded mass of a substance, especially of chewed food at the moment of swallowing. Oh, interesting. A type of large pill used in veterinary medicine. A single dose of a drug or other medicinal preparation given all at once. I'm guessing this definition is the one that's operative in that sentence. All right. Mike Mish Shedlock referred to 2019's version as satirical, comedic, insulting as part of a thorough columnoscopy. The guy who keeps emailing me, urging me to clean it up so his daughters can read it, save your breath. They're either too young, which means they should be reading the Harry Potter series written by that transgender-bashing cis-white billionaire, or probably have long since rounded the bases and are getting kinky with their boyfriends in ways that would curdle your blood. I also write this for Jerry and his kids. Colum is a whiny moron. You would interview someone like that? A Trump-supporting climate denier? He's a total idiot who needs to FOAD, fuck off and die. He simply refuses to acknowledge facts, says Jerry Mueller. My most audacious hate mailer responding to Jim Kunstler for his audacity. The title is a takeoff on the website entitled WTF Happened in 1971, which uses 50 graphics to document that the world changed abruptly in 1971. The Goldbugs know why. It is understandable that 2020 would be a year of abrupt change as well, a phase change, so to speak, but to what future is unclear. We all squandered inordinate kilos of ATP trying to understand events in ways that would not make us happier people, and for which an answer key eventually would be forthcoming. We have to be very careful about how we spend our time. Be very careful about not being manipulated into narrative after narrative. The eye of Sauron is focused on climate, COVID, and race. I'm not going to get caught up in it. Everything we get distracted onto, we don't make better. Douglas Murray, author of The Madness of Crowds. This year posed challenges, writing the damn thing, some common and others unique. Of course, I don't have the luxury or causally... Casually. Of course, I don't have the luxury of casually surveying a year. You can't be tubing all day and patch it together in your spare time. You gotta Stephen King the motherfucker. It just says the mother. Why not write it quarterly? Simple. It takes my beautiful mind that long to spot patterns in random noise and deconvolute the chorus of voices in my head. Also, nobody, and I mean nobody, in their right minds wants to rehash the events of 2020. The annual year in review is always about human folly. But how much folly is there when we're all living in our basements, Joe? I teased Dave about his technical analysis wizardry because I want him to write a children's book on charting. Still, I can't deny that he often captures the market zeitgeist in one tweet, says Tony Greer. Keeping it light was a Herculean task. I kept getting pulled by Lord Vader toward a revenge mindset, which I have curbed with only partial success. Epithet-rich allusions to baseball bats kept getting smuggled into the prose, stemming from undiagnosed coprolalia? Huh. All right, that's something to do with poop. The involuntary and repetitive use of obscene language as a symptom of mental illness or organic brain disease. Ah, all right. Potty mouthism. Epithet-rich allusions to baseball bats kept getting smuggled into the prose, stemming from our undiagnosed coprolalia. An acute swearing component of Tourette's syndrome. Oh, I suppose I just could have read the next phrase and spared myself the definition hunting. Some commenter after a podcast said, paraphrased, "This guy sure wants to put a hurt on a lot of people." Indeed, the sense of frontier justice runs deep in the entire Column clan. Horse thieves beware. I don't need anger management. I need people to stop pissing me off. Ad hominem attacks are reserved for the total douchebags. I like that. I don't need anger management. I need people to stop pissing me off. Excellent. Writers are desperate people, and when they stop being desperate, they stop being writers. Charles Bukowski. All right, I can go for that. Maybe that's why I've stopped writing. I'm not desperate anymore. I was inadvertently ready for the pandemic in some odd ways. I love medieval history and had just finished a book on the Black Death in the fall of 2019 and was pondering immunology when COVID-19 struck. Ah, the first contention. I refuse to capitalize the whole thing because COVID-19 makes no sense linguistically. It's not correct for an acronym or a proper name, and using all caps is shouting and distracts from other attempts at emphasis. Should I type like this? I don't care what everybody else on the planet does. They are wrong. Screw 'em. I appear to have gotten COVID-19 at birth. I have been tasteless and urged by friends and family to social distance since childhood. Obviously, I should wax philosophically about the COVID-19, right? But what do you say to 350 million basement-dwelling bunker monkeys who are now expert epidemiologists and virologists with rock-solid opinions on what parts of the pandemic sucked the saltiest balls? I dedicate far less page space to the pandemic or the elections than you might expect. It is so much better to tell the truth than to just shut up, says Douglas Murray, author of The Madness of Crowds. The year in review poses risk, possibly considerable risk, every year, but this year is special. No guff, no glory, I guess. There are a ton of social justice crazies, SJCs, out there. In the 65th year of my personal sitcom, the writers kept hurling absurdities to keep the series running, but I got canceled anyway. No, not by COVID-19, unless this is the sixth sense, but by the diversity industrial complex, otherwise known as the Clan of Cancel Culture, KKK, virtuously broadcasting to the world that I am a seriously twisted bastard. It is hard to argue with that. However, if people in visible positions feel they cannot speak up right now, when will they speak up? On their deathbeds? If a 65-year-old tenured professor can't express unpopular ideas, who can? A 9-to-5er who could be fired in a heartbeat has no voice. I will keep spewing drivel because somebody has to do it. Factoid, you cannot breathe with your tongue sticking out of your mouth. Stuff your tongues back into your mouths, you idiots. Of course you can. I have become increasingly aware that we are looking through our own lens with an emerging plot line that is self-consistent with our own unique narrative. As described in The Social Dilemma, the narrative is shaped nefariously by ideologically dubious weasels in Silicon Valley running their MK Ultra experiments on us through mass and social media. As I jam more pixelated pseudo-factoids into my noggin, doubts about their veracity are debilitating. How is it that smart blokes can peer at the same data and draw diametrically opposite conclusions? If I offered you $1,000 to convince just one person, that they were wrong about Russia collusion, the Biden laptop, election fraud, or the merits of sheltering, could you do it? Didn't think so. Some of us must be, as Jerry would say, whiny morons who should simply fuck off and die. But we all have our truths that we will defend, goddammit. This annual tome is necessary. Necessarily, The World According to Dave. At times it will sound narcissistic, but it's not. Editor's note, yes it is. It wanders through a range of topics in no way statistically weighted to their global importance, but presented in a Michael Lewis way, sniffing out the story beneath the story. What our four regular readers would tell you is that What our four regular readers would tell you is that I try to write about what others are not pondering. I don't always find the rotting corpse, but I am attracted to foul odors. Sturgeon's Law, 90% of everything is crap. Actually, Sturgeon's Law is 90% of everything is crud. The year in review is broken into two parts, with the individual sections hot linked and the contents below. The whole beast can be downloaded as a single PDF here. The references are in files listed by chapter, titles, part 1 and part 2. So obviously I'm not going to read this whole thing today. But let's have a look at the chat, see what people are saying. Nothing. People are saying nothing. All right. The cameras are not going to be pointed at the peaceful parts of the protests or insurrections. I emailed an article yesterday, John D. Louis. Well, I'll look for that. The case to be made for top-down authoritarian control. All right. Avert your eyes, folks. Actually, I'm going to show you all my most recent video.
If you enjoy it, subscribe on YouTube.
Go away, Lex. Not permanently, just for the moment. Let's see. So I'm going to play my own video on a live stream. Here we go.
Hey everybody, KMO here, and I forget how I disseminate particular messages. I don't know if I said it here in a video or just on the podcast, but my plan was to be in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. That's not going to happen now. I am still heading down almost to D.C. I'm going to make it as far south as Baltimore, where next Monday I'm going to take about a 2.5-hour walking tour of abandoned industrial infrastructure, basically the corpse of the body that used to provide, working class prosperity in that city and in this country, more generally speaking. So if you're in Baltimore next Monday, if you want to hook up with me and a few friends of the C-Realm, let me know. Comment here or send me email, kmo@crealm.com. About DC, Washington, all that, there comes a time when, if you're wise, in my opinion, you don't know what to hope for. Like Trump, impeachment. It's like a week until Joe Biden will be president. So, what's the point in rushing through this, this impeachment of Donald Trump? Well, part of the point is just condemnation of the man, just, to score points against it. But really, I think what people have in mind is prevent him from running in 2024. The next 4 years are very, very different if Trump is threatening to primary whoever the Republicans decide to put up, because the Republicans hate Trump. The Republican base, the voters, for the most part, love Trump. But the Republican elites, the lawmakers, the people who fund the think tanks, the whole Powell movement, Republican establishment, the Chamber of Commerce type style Republicans, and most especially, the defense contractor, neocon, permanent war Republicans, they hate Trump. They hate him. They want him gone. So what a position for the Republican Party to be in, to have this figure who ostensibly is on your team and who is loved, just absolutely loved and adored, by tens of millions of working class Republican voters, who, many of whom I know subscribe to some really bizarre fantasies about, Donald Trump's role in the world. If Trump cannot possibly run in 2024, then it's just a very different landscape. But what will be the result? What will be the downstream consequences of either preventing him from running or allowing him to run? What are the consequences for the Republicans? What are the consequences for the Democrats? What are the consequences for the country? I don't know. I don't know what the consequences will be, so I don't know what to hope for. So, my natural inclination, when on September 11th, 2001, I was in bed, I was in Washington State, so, 3 hours behind the East Coast, and my brother called me, and he told me about planes hitting the World Trade Center. And I thought, in the moment, just in my half asleep sort of response to that, my inclination was to minimize it or to make a joke of it. And it wasn't until I got up and I went to the computer and I watched the footage of the planes hitting, the towers hadn't collapsed at this time, that it really struck me. Well, the same thing kind of happened with the attack on the Capitol building last week. You know, I tuned into the media and I heard people talking about a coup and insurrection and, you know, an attempt to overthrow the government. And I thought all of that was absurd. I thought that was just histrionic bullshit. But, you know, the more I dwell on it, I mean, the man did, with, you know, forethought, draw people, you know, his supporters to the Capitol on that day with the intention of sending them over there to cause chaos. Now, a coup attempt, or, you know, an attempt to change the electoral outcome by means of a mob, do we judge it differently depending on how competently it was executed? I mean, is it just a joke because the person who perpetrated it is a joke? And, you know, this is not a rhetorical question. Intuitively, it seems like a half-assed, doomed-to-fail, you know, Keystone Cop-style attempt at coercing lawmakers into not certifying the election. It seems like the incompetent attempt shouldn't carry the same penalties as, you know, a competent attempt that might actually succeed. But why? I mean, that's not any sort of principle in jurisprudence. You know, if you're accused of murder, unless you are so stupid that you're clinically, you know, retarded, then you catch some leniency, you know, a bit of understanding and leeway. But if you're just a dumbass and you do a contemptible thing, you get the same punishment as somebody who is more competent and may well have succeeded at that exact same crime. And I'm not saying that there is any moral principle at work here that we should defer to. I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, you know, if Trump can run in 24 as opposed to if he can't. And one other thing, this is from Sagar and Crystal on Rising this morning, which I haven't finished yet, but you know, something that Trump voters will respond to is culture war issues. And with Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, as much as I think he is inadequate to the challenges that beset us, he is not a polarizing figure because nobody believes, you know, nobody except the absolute fringe, you know, QAnon attuned, you know, the lunatics, some of whom I'm sure are lovely people. But aside from the lunatics, nobody believes that Joe Biden is a socialist. Nobody believes that he's going to kowtow to the squad. Nobody believes that he's going to enact Medicare for all, you know, of his own accord. He might be forced into it by circumstances. He might be overcome by events, but it's not something he wants. It's not something he's ever going to champion. I mean, he's a decades-long champion of, you know, attempts to cut Social Security, which, you know, for a Democrat, that's just a moronic stance to take because old people vote, you know, and you're talking about taking money out of their pockets, out of their bank accounts. They vote, you know. So maybe it's a good thing. Like, the cynic in me wants to look for, you know, why this is all a catastrophe, or why it's all a farce, or why it's all just a tempest in a teapot which is distracting us from more important issues. But, you know, there is that remnant of my, like, 18, 19, 20-year-old new age self who wants to think, maybe we are threading the needle. Maybe we are walking that narrow path through all manner of calamities to deliver our country and industrial civilization and the peaceful global order, you know, through a time of extreme peril into a period of greater sustainability and stability. Is it possible that we're on the right path? That we are, you know, threading the needle? That we are weaving that very rare path through the minefield of history that is going to deliver us safely to the other side? If you refuse to entertain the possibility, why? You know, if you insist that everything is going to shit, why? Why that insistence? I mean, just as an exercise, like as a sort of form of meditation, maybe just, take all of your conviction that things are going to shit, pat it on the head, and say, stay. And then turn your attention in a different direction for a little while as an exercise, and just consider, what if things are going well? What if we are transitioning through a period of extreme precariousness, but we're doing it with grace and dexterity and skill, and above all, blind luck? I'm willing to inhabit that headspace every now and again. All right, that's all. I'll talk to you again later. Stay well.
All right. Not only am I back, but I've already drank half the cup of coffee I just poured for myself. So, are there any, only 20 views yet? Any comments? No comments. Okay. How about comments over here? Gnarly houseplant. Considering heading up to Baltimore? Well, for me, it's down. You are considering heading up to Baltimore. Right on. Don't know if I should spend the gas money. Well, I can't answer that for you. I don't think Trump was ever going to run in 2024. He was/is going to act like he was to remain relevant and retain some power. Right. But if he's impeached, and found guilty by the Senate, then he will not have the option of running in 2024. And that frees up the Republicans to, put up whatever vanilla candidate is appealing to the donor class, and just to tell the entire Republican, all the Republican voters, the Republican electorate, just to fuck off. You have no, you're not getting any populism out of us, people, so forget about it. What are you going to do? Vote for AOC? Without somebody like Trump, who could wave the right-wing populist banner, without him, the Republicans are free to ignore the pent-up anxieties and anger and desires of their voters. Let's see. Danger Dendals. Airbnb canceled all bookings in D.C. Yeah. I'm not going to D.C. anymore. I'm just going as far south as Baltimore. Last March, I wanted to go to Baltimore because BeaverCon was happening. Dare I ask, what is BeaverCon? All right. So what are we, 55 minutes into this live stream? Should I draw something or should I keep reading? I'm kind of caffeinated, I guess. Maybe that's what's going on. I'm of a mind to read something else, though. So, The Holy Grail of Restoration. Here we are. By John D. Liu. Mending the Sinai Peninsula. Oh, interesting. Oh, I did start to read this. Yeah, I did. Dust has blown over the Sinai's denuded landscape for so long that it's hard to imagine it as a biblical land of milk and honey. Yet, satellite images and other evidence tell another story. Seen from space, the Sinai Peninsula looks like a beating heart, with arteries and veins flowing to nurture the body. Clues from geologic time, evolution, and human history are all etched into the exposed soils. If one knows how to read this landscape, it is possible to see that rivers flowed in through the Sinai over vast evolutionary time. Even now, there are periodic flash floods when, because of the degraded landscape, rain that would nurture the land flows immediately into the sea. The strategic land is literally at the heart of early Western civilization, situated at the intersection between Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. Figuring prominently in the cosmologies of Western religions, the Sinai has an immense impact on human civilization in both historical and contemporary times. Some of the earliest human mining of minerals took place in the Sinai. Repeatedly emerging cultures vied for this prized real estate. Humanity has been moved by poetry and art emanating from the region, but conflict and suffering have emerged as well. Wow, it really does look like a heart, doesn't it? Huh. All right. For several hundred generations, humans have altered the habitat of living aquatic, plant, animal, bird, microbial, and fungal communities with devastating effects to the region's ecology. Over historical time, the vegetative cover and evolutionary biodiversity of the Sinai has been in large part lost. Imagine the importance if it were possible to restore the region to ecological health. Malik Bokebus, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Malik B. is a very capable, practical man in his late 40s for whom managing large engineering works is normal. His experiences span the globe, and many are of monumental scale. Of Belgian and Algerian ancestry, Malik has great empathy for the suffering of many people in the Middle East and beyond. The mixture of successful engineering at huge scale and personal understanding of the region's psyche make Malik a natural bridge between cultures. Well known in Egypt as project manager for the giant Belgian dredging company DEME, working on the enlargement of the Suez Canal, Malik was approached in January 2016 by an official of the Egyptian government and asked if his company could help restore Lake Bardawil in the northern Sinai. Protected from the Mediterranean Sea, inside a natural bay of accumulated coral deposits and marine sediments, Lake Bardawil, on the northern coast of the Sinai Peninsula, was evolutionarily and historically an abundant 40-meter-deep aquatic nursery. Now, with a depth of less than 2 meters, the water hypersaline and much hotter, the lake is only a shadow of what it once was. Fishing communities living and working along the lake's banks for as long as anyone can remember no longer count on catching fish to feed their families or make a living. The fishermen and most everyone else in the Sinai essentially have no gainful employment. Without legitimate work for the people to do, the northern Sinai has become a seriously dangerous place. To answer the question posed by the Egyptian government, Malik asked colleagues about who would be able to help create an integrated restoration design for Lake Bardawil from ecologic, economic, and social perspectives. The company referred Malik to Matthias Vanderhoven, a morphological engineer in his mid-30s who had worked on several projects in various parts of the world, including the construction of an artificial island in the Emirates. Earlier in his career, as a newly minted hydraulic engineer just out of university, Thijs had gained valuable experience working as a consultant with a team of innovative coastal engineers before being hired by DEME. Thijs had made a bit of a stir when he was first hired by DEME by criticizing practices in the offshore dredging industry. One can imagine risk-averse engineers working on gigantic infrastructural or extraction projects reacting to a youthful engineer telling them they were doing it all wrong. The top managers heard about the disruptive young man and called him into headquarters and asked him what he was doing criticizing the work of seasoned engineers in the field. Thijs proceeded to tell the company's management that from what he could see, the dredging industry was trying to go extinct. He told them that their current procedures would cause huge ecological impacts, constant legal disputes, and the loss of huge amounts of money. He added that there was another way to do the job. Interestingly, the top management at the time knew the industry was struggling with costly legal disputes, facing strong criticism of its environmental practices, its environmental impacts, and the potential of enormous fines. Instead of kicking the kid out and siding with the dredging cowboys, they asked him what he suggested they do. Never shy, Thijs, representing the thoughts of many young engineers, told them that the company should deploy large numbers of inexpensive sensors on all equipment above and below the ocean's surface, on vessels, on special grids of buoys in the water, and to use instruments and cameras above and below the waterline to collect comprehensive data on wind, currents, sediment movements, temperature, pH, and all other relevant information. Thijs explained that the data and images from the devices could be streamed in real time to a computer. The data would provide plotting points on a multidimensional graph representing real outcomes from all measured criteria. With this network in place, all decisions on dredging could be adjusted precisely based on analysis of the actual measured impacts. He called this proactive adaptive management. The leaders of the company were impressed enough to at least try it. After DEME piloted a project using this method and realized that it could save millions of euros as well as much embarrassment, there was no going back. Spurred on by a new generation of engineers who cared about the Earth and were dedicated to measuring the impact of their actions, the dredging industry took an important evolutionary step. When Malik and Thijs began to collaborate, sparks began to fly in a good way. Together, they were stronger, as if each provided a missing part of the other's personality. Most importantly, they both wanted their work to benefit the Earth and human civilization. Ties began to consider what could be done to bring Lake Bardowil back to ecological health and productivity. Recruiting allies, including colleagues within DEME, Arjan Moll, Frederick Goethals, Pierre de Geest, François de Coulinaire, Martin Lanters, a coastal engineering student at Ties' alma mater, Delft University, along with Josine Steenbergen. Sorry, folks, these names are not familiar to me. And Edward Schramm, researchers at the Institute for Marine Resources and Ecosystem Studies, IMARS, at Wageningen University. Ties and this growing team began to envision what sorts of interventions could restore the ecology and provide peaceful occupations for the communities near the lake and throughout the Sinai. Ties with the team shared their thoughts with Malik. Ties and the team shared their thoughts with Malik, who then discussed them with his superiors in the company and with the Egyptians, all of whom became increasingly interested in what was being considered. So this is a block quote from somewhere, but I don't know where it's from. The team began to gather huge amounts of data on the region. They studied the geography, the tides, the currents, the rainfall, the aquatic life, the terrestrial biodiversity, wind speed, wind direction, and historical weather patterns. They looked at interventions made in the lake in previous decades and the results, noting that opening inlets to allow for a controlled increase in the tidal flows while cautiously dredging the lake to increase the depth would result in 3 immediate ecological gains. First, the concentrations of salt in the water would be lowered. Second, the temperature would be reduced. And third, the fish in the lake would rapidly increase in size and number. Their research also suggested that improving the ecology would significantly benefit the local population, reversing the decline in the fishing industry and adding to food security, employment, and much-needed emergence of a legitimate economy in the Sinai. I wish I knew what that was excerpted from. I find that style of prose much easier to read than the main prose here. At this point, the design exercise had answered the questions that had originally been asked of Malik by the Egyptian government official. Perhaps most people would simply have declared victory and moved on, but as the data sets concerning the lake and the region continued to increase and were analyzed, Ties began to notice the potential of positive feedback loops being triggered that suggested transformational changes would occur if a certain progression of interventions were implemented. This spurred him to increasingly impassioned analysis. As the team began to run big data weather research and forecasting, WRF, models on computers, certain scenarios began to show changes that pointed toward extremely compelling potential outcomes for the Middle East, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. These hinted at a massive breakthrough in understanding, explaining many of the historical outcomes in the region. Ties began to wake in the middle of the night and find that he was in the midst of drawing detailed maps of North Africa and the Middle East on the floor. His family and friends were concerned that he wasn't eating or sleeping regularly and was becoming more obsessively hyperactive. Around this time, a friend, Eric van den Lockant, asked Ties, "Do you see the VPRO documentary Green Gold? Have you ever heard of the Loess Plateau, John D. Liu, William Verwerda, or the Common Land Foundation? Green Gold, also called Regreening the Desert, if you haven't seen it, is a film I made with Dutch public television for a series called Tegenlicht, or Backlight, about the long-term inquiry I've been working on for most of the last 3 decades. The film contains documentation of ecosystem restoration worldwide, including in China, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Jordan. It follows other films I've made on the subject, including The Lessons of the Loess Plateau and Hope in a Changing Climate. Ties, excited with his own work, was not interested in some documentary he had never heard of, but his friend didn't give up. Eric finally downloaded Green Gold and forced Ties to sit down and watch it. The initial screening of this film caught Ties' imagination, and he began to watch it over and over again. All right. Well, I haven't seen it, so I probably should. Can't play it now. My own journey led me to understand that it is possible to rehabilitate large-scale degraded landscapes, including restoring vast areas degraded over historical time. I have also learned that while this is possible, it is in no way easy. There are certain natural principles that are necessary to understand, including that biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter are central to evolutionary outcomes and ecological function. When humans shift away from the scenario to degradation of these essential processes, it inevitably leads to ecosystem collapse. When a region is devegetated, whether from greed or ignorance or both, many natural evolutionary processes are altered, causing several measurable and predictable outcomes. It is simply cause and effect. All living matter on Earth is part of a web of life that has taken a lifeless molten rock surrounded by what, for us, are poisonous gases, and over enormous time, through continuous photosynthesis, transformed it into a beautiful planetary garden with an oxygenated atmosphere, a freshwater system, rich, fertile soils, and amazing biodiversity. My observations and the results of numerous studies show that when you lose the vegetative cover, respiration through photosynthesis is reduced, the surface temperature and evaporation rates massively increase, causing spiraling negative feedback loops that can and do destroy functional ecosystems. When these negative trends continue for thousands of years, you end up with conditions very similar to those in the Sinai. Left picture. Hojiagao in Shanxi, early September 1995. Right picture, same place, September 2009. From Hope in a Changing Climate, broadcast initially on the BBC World. My studies in China and worldwide suggest, at the very least, that it is possible to restore ecological function in many regions of the world. After supporting my early study for some time, the World Bank and the British Department for International Development made some choices that propelled my thinking to a larger stage. This began when I was assigned to make a scientific presentation of the Yellow River Forum in 2005. After dropping out of university to be a television cameraman, I became an accidental scholar working with a number of universities and research institutes, including the University of the West of England, Rothamsted Research, Reading University, George Mason University, and International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and the Netherlands Institute of Ecology. That first scientific presentation was the start of a trajectory that has led to hundreds of presentations over the years. One of the most eventful of these lectures took place in 2009 at the Talberg Forum in Sweden. A very high-level audience, including the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, the head of the European Environmental Agency, the chairman of the IUCN, and 500 of their closest friends, were forced to listen to me. The Talberg Forum in 2009 was also very notable as Johan Rockström of the Stockholm Resilience Center was introducing the concept of the planetary boundaries, which was then published in a special edition of Nature magazine. The important paper can be seen as an increasingly dire warning updating the limits to growth that the Club of Rome introduced in 1972. This analysis is now widely accepted and punctuated by the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, that warns of potentially catastrophic consequences if we don't immediately act to reduce rising global temperature averages. At the Talberg Forum, among the luminaries, I felt very much like an unknown small fish. I spoke after former Norwegian Prime Minister Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, who had been the head of the World Health Organization. Dr. Brundtland was well known for being asked by the Secretary General of the United Nations in 1983 to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development that published an important policy paper widely known as the Brundtland Report. This important statement of global human intention included for the first time that sustainable development was mentioned in international diplomacy. That was, for me, a very important turning point because through direct personal observation and documentation, I was convinced that restoration was possible, but was beginning to feel that I was a lone voice calling in the wilderness about it. My presentation at the Talberg Forum had a very interesting effect. It fundamentally changed the tenor of the conference from one of resignation bordering on despair to one of hope and excitement. As fate would have it, in the audience was William Verwoerde, then the country director of IUCN Netherlands, who had become a friend and a champion of restoration. Following my presentation about the rehabilitation of the Loess Plateau and how China's example had motivated massive changes in Ethiopia and Rwanda, and the potential of ecosystem restoration on a planetary scale, Willem came to me and said, "We have to work together for the rest of our lives." My answer was, "Okay, but it's not long enough." Since that time, Willem and I have been working together. A few years after we met, Willem left IUCN and created the Common Land Foundation in order to take ecosystem restoration mainstream. As a film, Green Gold brought together many ideas that I had wanted to communicate for quite some time. When Thijs saw the film, he felt compelled to contact someone at the Common Land Foundation. On May 10, 2016, Thijs sort of stormed the Common Land office with Malik, Pierre de Geest, and Delphine van Gotham. They presented the initial design for the restoration of Lake Bardewil and the Sinai to Willem, John Loudon, and me. The presentation made by Thijs and his colleagues was very well thought out and wonderfully hopeful. Since documenting the Loess Plateau rehabilitation, where the pilot project restored an area of 35,000 square kilometers, most other restoration projects have seemed small to me. Thijs and his team's vision for the restoration of Lake Bardewil and the Sinai did not seem small. Having studied for months, Thijs and his team had begun to uncover and accumulate clues from many other studies. Complex ecological phenomena, which in isolation might seem like far-out facts, can reveal logical patterns that are understandable. They show cause and effect that can explain many of the outcomes that we see today. This type of information is especially meaningful when you and your colleagues are in possession of a vast engineering capability and are used to deploying it for commercial reasons. It apparently gives one a different understanding of what is possible when you think it is normal to build artificial islands or double the size of the Suez Canal. To say the least, there was great excitement when Thijs and his team shared their work. The data sets that the team collected included studies analyzing pollen samples, suggesting that over evolutionary time it was normal for ancient biodiversity from the Indian Ocean region to migrate into and live in North Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. The evidence also showed that the trend of biodiversity flowing north into the region reverses at a point several thousand years ago. What exactly changed to stop the wind, water, and biodiversity from flowing north? Very quickly, Thijs and I traveled to the Loess Plateau in China so he could fully understand the scale of the restoration and regeneration that had been accomplished there. We drove many hours through thick, diverse forests that cover what 25 years ago was bare earth. We sat outside of our cave hotel in Yan'an when a huge rainfall event drove us back indoors. We were forced to consider what it meant when you watched barrels of rain come down in an area that had been thought of by most people to be a desert only 20 years before. To see that this water was absorbed into the biomass and into the intact soils, and that these were the methods that had reversed traditional desertification was clearly apparent. We walked by the rapids on the Yellow River, and I explained the role of microbes in evolution and their relationship to the oxygenated atmosphere, soil fertility, and carbon sequestration. Thijs hopped around on the rocks and pointed. Then he stopped in his tracks and stared at a puddle. There, in a small stagnant pool, algae were growing, emitting tiny bubbles of oxygen, not only illustrating but actually breathing life onto the planet. That night, Thijs showed me one of his drawings of a water catchment from the Sinai, explaining his thoughts. I stopped him and asked if he knew who Milan was. When he said no, I showed him a picture that Professor Milan had made some years before and showed me when I first met him. It was almost identical to Thijs' drawing. Professor Milan's drawing is of the Spanish landscape rising from Valencia, and Thijs' drawing is of the Sinai rising from the Mediterranean south toward Mount Catherine. But without a title and compass bearings, you could barely tell them apart. I introduced Professor Milan to Thijs, and they began to communicate and meet. Professor Milan's work spans decades as one of the world's premier meteorologists working in Spain, Canada, Holland, Germany, the EU, and the Mediterranean. With Professor Milan's help, Thijs and the team began to learn more about the relationship between natural vegetation and temperature, cloud formation, and rainfall. The effects of deforestation and devegetation of the Sinai thousands of years ago can be seen in hindsight, and we can surmise how the ecosystem reacted to the function decreased from human impact. Without vegetation cover and normal evaporation and transpiration, the temperature on the soil surface massively increased. I have seen this in measurements the Chinese have made that show the same thing, and through the experience of looking at natural and degraded systems worldwide. So another block quote from where I do not know. Thijs learned from Professor Milan that thermal updrafts caused by very high temperatures on devegetated landscapes drive moist air high into the atmosphere where it cannot rain. but instead becomes an even more serious greenhouse gas than CO2. As one looks closely, one begins to see how the Sinai devegetation over time led to dehydration of the biome and the attendant higher surface temperatures that caused an inversion in wind direction. These extremely high temperatures, caused by human beings devegetating this specific region, reversed the wind, which began to pull moisture-laden air to the south. If you play a scenario forward from 7,000 years ago of a vacuum pulling moist air out of North Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, the end result is exactly what we have right now. It seems to me that what Ties and his team saw is very probably the cause of desertification in North Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Satellite images of the Sinai are extremely revealing. They show the remains of numerous rivers flowing down out of the mountains. It looks like the beating heart and the veins of a body. These are etched into the stone. The amount of water and the force that did this is clearly enormous. Satellite images of mineral deposits also show that the drying of the Sahara took place very rapidly. This is clearly visible in sediment core readings as well. We even know when this took place. We are forced to contemplate why the areas that were known as the Fertile Crescent, the land of milk and honey, and the Garden of Eden, have become war-torn deserts. If this thesis is proven, then we are looking directly through the eyes of our ancestors and watching as they cause the desertification of the cradle of civilization of the Western world. It is important to note that religious teachings and evolutionary science-based analysis both posit that we humans emerged in paradise. The earth provides us with all that is needed for life to flourish. When studying how this came about, the best evidence we have suggests that the Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago, give or take 100 million, when cosmic dust orbiting the Sun solidified into a molten rock surrounded by what for us are poisonous gases. As the crust of the planet cooled, microbial life emerged and began to differentiate. The planet's violent crucible eventually cooled enough for the photosynthetic living beings to, over prodigious time, to transform the Earth into a beautiful garden, with an oxygenated atmosphere, a freshwater system, fertile living soils, and wonderful biodiversity. Looking back and studying the ruins of once great civilizations, we may be forgiven for thinking that our history is long. However, in relation to geological and/or evolutionary time, human history is quite sudden, short, and brutal. Over what little history we humans do have, it is clear that we often behaved as a murderous gang, terribly mistreating each other and massively changing Earth systems in quite dangerous ways. History is often taught as if those who most successfully brutalized, killed, and enslaved others were somehow the winners. From another perspective, it seems obvious that in violence and war, there are no winners. We all lose. As the design team at DEME went further with an emerging vision of what was possible in terms of ecological restoration using the existing industrial capacity, combined with ecological understanding, the corporation began to contemplate whether its future might be very different than its past. Looking at the options, extraction, the petroleum industry, the military-industrial complex, and just large engineering in general, one could consider this industry as archaic megafauna that is not really suited to a new reality that is more caring, egalitarian, and sustainable. But perhaps we need to look again. What if this capacity to create change at enormous scale, tempered by consciousness and mutual benefit, was exactly what was needed? What if this power could be channeled toward regenerating degraded landscapes? Suddenly, part of the company began to see its future could be one that regenerates natural systems instead of one that destroys them. This change in intention is central to the evolutionary step that human civilization is called to take at this time. This type of thinking could provide a pathway for this and other companies to create a new, holistic, sustainable industrial reality for the future. Since we met, Ties and I have reconnected with some very experienced people who I met earlier on my inquiry. These include Professor Li Rui, a Chinese scientist who has spent his entire working life on Earth restoration, Professor Tim Flannery, the famous Australian scientist and author of several books, including The Weather Makers, Daniel Halsey, a designer, trainer, and author who has been designing and implementing perennial polyculture landscapes, Dr. Charling Dao, a renowned physicist, activist, and friend, and Dr. John Todd, who has been designing constructed wetlands for decades and is considered to be, by many, to be the father of the field. Many others in Holland, Belgium, and beyond have begun to co-create a future that, instead of destroying the systems we rely on for life through ignorance and greed, restores them with consciousness and generosity. A vision has begun to emerge from the growing understanding that by carefully dredging inlets from the Mediterranean Sea, it is possible to quickly reduce the salinity and the temperature of the weather in Lake Bardowell. These actions will result in an increased tidal basin that will lead to significant and sustainable increases in the amount of fish, helping revive the traditional fishing industry and creating hope that things can get better. Dredging carefully to further deepen the lake and moving the materials from the lake onto the land allows for a number of positive developments both in the lake and on the land. These include growth in calcium carbonate from growth of aquatic life, increased seagrasses, expanded reed beds in the lake, and a vast potential for soil formation through the introduction of microbial communities, fungi, and organic material on the land. All right. Consciously aligning human behavior with ecological systems over larger and larger areas of the marine and terrestrial environment can lead to further positive developments. The use of marine sediments to rapidly grow organic soils could change the fertility, productivity, and moisture retention in the Sinai. Massive propagation and planting of grasses, bushes, and trees will sequester carbon in both the biomass and the soil, which will physically lower the temperatures on the surface of the earth. Lowering the temperatures will have a massive impact on evaporation and allow more water to be captured in the biomass and soil organic matter, helping to recharge the localized hydrological cycle. All of this will lead to positive feedback loops, further increasing moisture cycling, vegetative growth, and the return of biodiversity. To achieve this requires the creation of meaningful jobs that serve the local interest, while simultaneously helping to address the most serious problem that human civilization has ever faced, the potential of runaway climate change. There is simply no doubt that these ecological improvements will positively influence the human social situation in the Sinai. Carrying the analysis further, one begins to wonder, what would happen if these actions could reverse the causes of desertification in the region? If it were possible to stop the vacuum effect sucking moisture-laden air into the high atmosphere and pulling it to the south, would the inverse be to return the winds flowing north over the Sinai? Could this mean that the moisture-laden air coming from the Indian Ocean would return to the entire region? Could it be possible to rehydrate the dehydrated biome in the Sinai? Might it be possible to bring back the evolutionary outcomes that created the Garden of Eden? The siren song of restoring the cradle of Western civilization to ecological health has firmly captured the hearts and minds of several talented people. Committing to the call to blend industrial capability with ecology has led Thais, Maddie Ackerman's Gockel, and Gigi's Bossman, or Gigi's Bossman, I don't know how to pronounce that, to create a holistic engineering firm called the Weathermakers. The name is inspired by Professor Tim Flannery's book that posits that humanity has already become weathermakers, but not consciously. What the new Weathermakers show is that it is possible to make our industrial impact conscious and nurturing instead of destructive. This is a necessary step toward sustainability for survival of humanity. And the survival of humanity. The Weathermakers thesis has been shared with the main science bodies in the Netherlands, the Dutch government, the Belgian government, the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, ICARDA, the World Bank, Wetlands International, the Ramsar Convention Secretariat, and several other international experts in the field. In each case, there has been an enthusiastic response because the thesis that the Weathermakers have presented is such a plausible and innovative idea. Functional living ecosystems are formed of diverse life forms in symbiosis. It stands to reason that if human systems seek to emulate natural ones, that these will be extremely complex, decentralized, and interactive. The initial design for the Sinai is a very good start that immediately recognizes relationships between organic material and hydrology, temperature differentials and wind speed, direction and altitude, microbiological interactions with geological minerals, organic growth of vegetation and soils, and the importance of respiration of plants and animals in the regulation of weather and climate. Several of the concepts in the Weathermakers thesis are groundbreaking. The The weather research and forecast modeling suggesting that fundamental shifts in wind patterns could be brought about by restoration of the entire Sinai is of huge importance. The strategic use of marine sediments on land, combined with microbial and fungal inoculation, has a very large potential for the protection of coastal regions. Creating vast numbers of meaningful jobs for marginalized people has the potential to reduce instability and promote peace. The overall intention of the project has the potential to show the global industrial complex how to pursue regenerative and peaceful pursuits, thus ending pollution and degradation, making holistic engineering central to the future of human civilization. This thesis advocates transformational change. These changes are applicable and relevant not only in the Sinai, they are needed for the entire region and the world. Transformation is tantalizing because it is possible. If we have this as our intention, then we can make it happen. However, transformation is complicated because the current global market economy based on extraction, manufacturing, and buying and selling simply does not value people who do not contribute to the global transactional economy, even while valuing criminals who plunder the Earth's resources and oppress billions of innocent people. How to resolve this contradiction is central to human efforts at regeneration. Answering this dilemma could lead us to the restoration of the entire planet. We have grown so used to believing that things we produce, buy, and sell are the basis of the economy, it is hard to imagine that actually the wind, rain, and air are more valuable. Let us take a deep breath and ask if we are about to destroy our civilization. What is most precious? In a situation where climate change threatens our existence, what do we think is the value of natural climate regulation? Following this thesis is like seeking the Holy Grail. The vision that we can mend our collective broken heart and live again in the garden is beautiful and compelling. If this is even remotely possible, we are obligated to take on the challenge. All right. There it is. I've read it. What do we got? So... Okay. A conference on beavers. That sounds cool. Damn cool. McConnell is not going to schedule a trial in the Senate. So as of now, it does not look like he will be removed from office. Now it's just a buffer zone between Egypt and Israel. A morphological engineer. Okay. David Fleming writes about this too. Link emailed. Anti-permaculture pretty much was happened. But what will happen to the spice worms? They die in water. The ecosystem will no longer be suitable for spice worms in that area of Egypt/Israel. Well, you know what? I have not been getting my allotment of spice, so I don't care if from my perspective, the spice need not flow. So maybe no spacing guild for them. Cave hotel? Interesting. 7,000 years of suck. Make a desert. Now humans are working on drying out the Amazon basin, sadly. Totally, and I just had McDonald's. Lol. It would be nice if large flows of capital would flow to companies for ecosystem restoration. Well, that's what I was thinking about the whole time I was reading that article. It's like, how is it that this dredging company can get paid to restore this lake? Who's paying for that? And, how can they afford to completely reorganize their business model away from extraction and the construction of things which disrupt, the hydrological cycle, among other things? Basically, how do you make capitalism value what is really valuable and account for externalities? Let's see. Ben Rubber says, yeah, they've been working at getting the word out for years. I got into their projects around 2016, was a member, $11 a month for a few years. There are many camps, but none close to me yet. They want to help feed the homeless and unemployed and incorporate them into careers into restoration, watersheds, and ecosystem function. Dead Niddle said, they're using Dr. Liu's work on Open Source Ecology's campus. Parker says, is this a project that is happening? Ben Rubber, yeah, it's not profitable, so talk has lingered on utilizing people who were considered waste products of industrial civilization. Permaculture principle, seeing problems as solutions. It's happening all around the world in small camps. They have a website and Instagram. Something involving major dredging does not sound like something that can happen in small camps, says Parker. Maybe by the time I'm KMO's age, it will take hold. Wish I could work for them doing restoration, but now it's mostly those with property and private savings doing restoration camps right now. Governments haven't really got on board, but the UN declared 2020 to 2030 the decade of ecosystem restoration, but I don't know what that means. New Green Deal, says Danger Dead Nettles. Buy me an earth mover. Ecosystem restoration camps, not the dredging company referenced. Good article. I would have increased the speed by 1.5 if this was a video. Well, I wondered if I was reading too quickly for it to be listenable, but not everybody listens to audio text at high speed. Hey, what's on Twitter? Benjamin Lee, KMO, give a ramble on this angle at some point, will you? Ecosystems are therefore crucial in our net greenhouse gas emissions and play a vital role in the global energy transition. To a large extent, climate is about what happens to energy when sunlight meets the earth. Intriguing thinking that the weather makers in the Netherlands... Oh, all right. Intriguing thinking at the weather makers in the Netherlands. Yeah, so interesting that the human changes to the landscape, in the Sinai caused moisture to evaporate and go higher into the atmosphere where it's too high up to condense and fall as rain. But once it's up in the upper atmosphere, water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas, exacerbating the temperature increase. I hadn't heard of that before. All right. What's this? I would have to be an infrastructure investment by governments. It would have to be an infrastructure investment by governments. I guess it's not funded because accounting for ecosystem degradation is expensive to account for in a world that has not paid for externalities the whole time. Haha, I've blown up all your internet experience. I'm not sure how or what you mean. All right, let's close that. So I'll leave it open and I'll put these links to the things I've read in the... Oh, speaking of beavers, Eager, the surprising secret life of beavers and why they matter. I'll put them in the description for this stream. Look at that, 3:35. The stream is half over and I haven't drawn a thing yet. Anybody have anything else with which to distract me? Let's see. What's happening? So I'm shocked at the support I received after my announcement yesterday. You are all amazing people and I love you all. Well, that's... I don't know what he's talking about, but what a lovely thought. 0 HP Lovecraft. Does everybody get that? That's a joke. HP is in hit points. Anyway. It seems that non-human primates don't learn to use currency to trade with conspecifics because they don't trust each other, out of uncertainty that the other side will keep its end of the bargain. The fairness of the deal... What's this? The fairness of the deal needs human oversight. Monkeys are smart enough to trade with each other and use currency, but they won't do it because they don't trust the other monkeys. What if the evolutionary killer app for humans wasn't intelligence, but trust? Ah, that gets a like. Huh, 901. Right on. It was the ability to believe in stuff that isn't real, like values and groups larger than Dunbar's number. Even among humans, high levels of trust and social capital are dependent on loyalty to some abstraction, like the nation or even the race, as opposed to your close kin. Huh. Man, it's portfolio day. Oh, it hurts me to see work this good. I mean, obviously it pleases me as well. All right. All right, no new messages. Well, I'm about to start drawing. I know some of you don't like it, and yet you tune in anyway. So this is what I drew yesterday. So we can get rid of some stuff like the background and the reference layers. And let's bring the lion back in. And we will move him over to where he's going to be. So let's get the tabmate fired up. Oh, let me actually get the browser where I can see it. So if somebody posts a comment, I can see it. Oh, what have I done? What's all that? Huh. Oh, have I accidentally... No, here it is. Here it is. Aren't you supposed to be drawing according to the boss part of yourself? Yes. And actually, it's so easy for me to put it off because I'm actually past the drawing stage. Now I'm into the coloring, which is, for me, tedious. But I'm putting on the glove. Yeah, use your free will to have dominion over your body for profitable labor. Yes. Although, what I'm drawing right now, these are my own characters. I don't actually get paid to draw them. So this is, economically speaking, whoops, not the best use of my time. All right, the lion comes over here. I need to place him so that I can draw in his eyes so he's looking at the right place, in the right, he's making eye contact with her. All right, lion color. Look at that. That looks like it's in the right place. Okay. So now, lion sketch. Oh, definitely not in the right place. Let's try and come over here. Okay. That wasn't really necessary. I can turn that off. So... he's a blue-eyed lion. It's true. Oops. That looks to be about right. Finished Star's Reach. Meh. Started Money, Whence It Came, Where It Went, by John Catherine. So you didn't much care for Star's Reach, huh? Interesting. Whoops. From your perspective, what did it lack? What would a more compelling story have that it didn't? He's not quite looking at her. Close enough. All right. You're dismissed. Our light source is up here. What do we got here? It was entertaining enough. I was interested in more of how the planet's climate and landscape changed. I like the idea that scraping/salvaging becomes a centuries-long industry, though. Yes, and that it is controlled by a guild. I like that. The Ruinmen. All right. The alien component of the story felt goofy. Plausible enough, though. I appreciated the idea that we, in his view, would likely never have the resources that would allow us to reach other stars. You know, a more nuanced, thoughtful, and informed take on that, I think, is the Kim Stanley Robinson novel Aurora. I think that's what it's called. And it's about people on a generations ship, who have been sent. They were born on the ship, but the ship is on its way to another star system, and they're supposed to colonize it. And they get there, and they try to colonize 2 other planets in this system, and they fail. Absolutely fail. And it's a story about why... I mean, the ultimate point of the story is humans evolved on Earth, as biological entities. It is this environment that we are suited to and no other. And in the story... Earth had sent many of these colony ships out and kind of bankrupted itself in the process and never heard from any of them. It's implied that they all failed except for the one that came back. And the one that came back, the crew of the one that came back was absolutely hated by the people back on Earth. They felt betrayed. That, they had, or their ancestors had spent all of this energy and money and materials to send people to the stars, and, the people came back. Let me double check and make sure that is the title of the book. I think that's what it was called. Yeah, it's called Aurora. So, here, let's go back to reading. So, here are some reviews. This guy who gives it 2 stars says, mediocre book, but that's just me. I've tried for years to like this author's work and have largely failed. The book is slow and didactic and often preachy. I realize this is just the narrator's point of view, which is great from a technical achievement, but makes it hard for me to really enjoy the book. The book is crowded. It's like 3 novels in one and is slow and dull at times. I've already mentioned its flaws with the writing style. Additionally, I just couldn't connect with the characters. They all just seem meh. I'm not sure what I expected from this book, but I was hoping for something better. So I give this a 2. It's long, slow, and dull, with preachy hard sci-fi lectures thrown in randomly. I find myself interested in the ideas thrown out by the author, but then I read his books and end up disappointed. Only one of his books left on my shelf, and then I'll probably never read his work again. Weird, I really enjoy Kim Stanley Robinson books. So here's somebody who gave it 5. Kinda hated this for the first half, even though I've otherwise loved everything by Kim Stanley Robinson. The characters aren't astoundingly intelligent or prepared for what's happening to them. It's an elevator episode without enough comedy, and the computer is the most interesting voice. Blah, blah, blah. Guess I've explored the solar system and need to have a new setting, blah, blah, blah. Then all the nonsense is happening for a reason, and Kim Stanley Robinson's usual themes come out in a whole new way. And how is every book he writes the best book ever written? Seriously, how does he do it? All right. Oh, James Hughes marked it as to read. All right. Oh, okay. You want to do the reading, Danger? I'll get to drawing, so I'll start a Zoom call. Let's see. Host a meeting with video off.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. And there you go. Anybody who wants to can jump on. Alrighty, so I'm going back to the drawing. No, that's not what I meant to do. That's what I meant to do. Oh, it's Parker. Check, check.
Hello.
There you are. All right.
Thought I'd jump in.
All right, here you are. Danger says, "Don't worry, you're just maxing out your experience points." Okay.
Let me mute you here.
Audible labor. All right. Ben Rubber is heading out. Likely be back later. Well, there's only an hour and 10 minutes left of this stream. Oh, and here's
It's
Danger.
good. I appreciate Ben Rubber adding that article. That was very interesting about possibly renewing the Sinai Desert.
Yeah. And there's Danger, but I don't hear anything from Danger.
I wonder if the Sinai Desert would be better off if Israel had hung on to it.
Hey, Parker.
Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Hey, man.
All right.
How you doing?
I am well. How are you?
Good. I was just greening the desert this morning. Or ungreening the swamp. Or no, draining the swamp.
You want to be
I'm
called?
down in Louisiana.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Should I call you Danger?
Please call me Danger. It's a danger to know me. I mean, it's a pleasure.
That's not a typical name, but
Pleasure to meet you. Okay.
So what were you doing in Louisiana?
I was digging this silt pit out to make a new bed for carrots. So that these really massive rains come, and then it washes it all into the silt pit, and then you can just harvest the silt from the silt pit and make the new beds for the next season.
What is a silt pit?
It's like the lowest point in the landscape. So over the years, I've just observed the site.
Are you by a river or stream? Is that why it's called a silt pit? Is because it fills up with silt from a flooding stream?
Exactly.
Or okay.
Yeah, we're right on the Mississippi River, so basically on the other side of the levees. So technically, we're below sea level. But they pump the water out of the city back into the lakes and the spillways and the river.
So you're probably on some doomed landscape that will eventually be overtaken by the sea in 50 years or so.
Yeah, life is a doomed landscape destined for the sea.
Or desert. All right.
Okay, I was thinking about reading this Egyptian public works project back in the year 6000 BC.
Oh, right on.
That's an old public works project.
Make it
Yeah,
so.
and this is on the This is on in the chapter called Unlean, from the book Lean Logic.
Uh-huh.
So it's like the opposite of his thesis is this chapter. So if you want to know the David Fleming's thesis, you just unlearn this chapter on Unlean.
Lean Logic musical group. That's not it.
You know, they did. They started a musical group too.
It's
I
like
love
the
it.
same people that wrote the book have a musical group? That is unusual.
I think
No,
the author is
it's a
dead.
movement. It's like permaculture or transition town, Lean Logic.
Oh, okay. All right.
They're part of that movement.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or like Extinction Rebellion. It's like no leadership, just completely permissionless innovation. But it could just be seen as the continuation of the UK Green Party, which he founded. So the case for lean is strong. It is. I got to make sure this yogurt's not going to burn too, y'all. So keep an eye on the yogurt. If it starts to boil over, let me know.
I do not see your video image, so no promises there.
Okay, good. Parker, you can make sure. Or maybe I'll watch it. Okay. The case for lean is strong. It is clear about its intention. It declutters tasks from irrelevant preoccupations and commitments. It sustains a regular flow. It invites original and exact responses. It learns from feedback. It works. It's been proven. It is very specifically suited to be the modular communities of the future, when the market state will be too weakened to sustain the supply of goods, incomes, and order on which we depend. Resilient local communities will, by accident or design, find themselves drawn into a political and economic order, which is in essence is lean. And yet, lean is not the only social and economic order with potential for a time when the market is no longer with us. There is a case for looking at another one with a formidable record, not only in terms of size, but in longevity. We are about to pay a brief visit to a form of society with resilience, although recently, and maybe temporarily, in retreat. It endured for thousands of years, far longer than any other system of statehood in history. It is the political economy which started to form at various intensities and at various dates, ranging up to 6,000 years ago, in and among other states, China, northern India, Mesopotamia, Persia, Egypt, Peru, and Mexico. They had a problem. They had a problem. Water. Some of them received an annual monsoon with a vast amount of rainfall over a few weeks, which often filled the rivers and caused flooding, while the rest of the year was dry and often very hot. Even if it rained, much of it evaporated before it could do anything useful. And evaporation kicked in hard as soon as forests were cleared for cultivation. Others had little reliable rainfall and depended on the flow of giant rivers, such as the Yellow River, which receives meltwater from the Himalayas, or the Nile, which carries water from tropical Africa. Or to look at it another way, their problem was people. They could get by in a landscape with long periods of low rainfall, and water being naturally conserved by forest, if the population was low, and the demands made on the land were minimal. A society that left it to nature to supply its meat, fruit, vegetables, saved itself a lot of trouble, and people needed to work for only some 2 hours a day. But as the population rose, the only way of expanding the supply of food to keep pace was by irrigation and related infrastructures, intensifying their agriculture to build an ecology capable of supporting a lot of people. That, to open it up a bit, meant infrastructure. They needed to build and maintain irrigation systems to supply the water, which became both more necessary and less available as they advanced into agriculture, and felled the forests. And along with the work went the demands of harvest, storage, transport, and distribution, and the various stratagems needed to make the best of less fertile soils, all supported by the institutions of administration and government. Productivity advanced. In conditions of abundant unpaid labor and no competition, the technical advances would have to be on the scale-enabling kind. Water management, domestications, eventually pulleys, rather than labor-saving kind. The chief means of productivity advance was a massive increase in working hours. See the intensification paradox. There follows a relentless growth sequence typical of intensification. More land and more labor is needed per capita, per person. At the same time, the population itself grows. When exponential growth becomes established, you quickly reach large numbers. But once these societies had reached the limit of what their land and water could support, they remained at that level for century after century, hovering above and below the threshold of subsistence. To support the population, water had to be diverted on, eventually, a stupendous scale to supply irrigation systems stretching over, for example, the low-lying, arid plains of China. But being low-lying, these regions were also exposed to flood, so it became equally essential to establish means of flood control. And floods, when they happened, could be apocalyptic, not least because of its characteristics of such prevalent resilient approach. The containment measures, when they failed, multiplied the problem. In 132 BC, the Yellow River burst over its banks, and the dikes that had been built to prevent such an occurrence, sending a branch of the river across the plain and inundating a whole region. 150 years later, the whole river changed its course, finding a new path to the sea. Presented with repair operations like these, nothing could happen until the emperor himself got involved, with supporting cast of thousands. And with such workforce at their command, it was only natural to knock off a few more dainty projects, such as the Grand Canal, 1,000 miles long, and the Great Wall, 5,500 miles, and the pyramids. It would be possible to discuss
That's not dainty.
What?
That's not dainty.
A pyramid? Well, you might as well. You're already at it. It would be possible to discuss whether such supergiant systems of irrigation, flood control, and water transport could be organized on the bottom up. Lean Basic advocated in Lean Logic, in, for instance, the entry on the commons. However, from what we know about the commons and the scale of the hydraulic operations needed in these ancient empires, about the lack of earth-moving equipment other than men with spades, and about the death rates, it seemed unlikely. Many of the criteria for a functioning commons, such as the need for a local autonomy, for a shared sense that it was worth the attempt for the task to be on manageable scale, and for good match between the amount of work that would have to be put in and the benefits that would be expected by the people who did it, are conspicuously absent in the case for giant hydraulic schemes. Payback postponed for generations an improbable death in ant-like armies of workers. These are like not opportunities for which we should expect a rush of public, spirited commoners to sign up. In any case, bottom-up programs on that scale didn't happen. All the large irrigation systems were top-down projects involving extreme autocracy. These were regimes based on intimidation reinforced by punishment. The Hindu law book of Manu sets out rules for the conduct of the ideal king. It commends, "Punishment, the protector of all creatures, an incarnation of the law, formed of Brahman's glory. Punishment is, in reality, the king, and the male. Punishment alone governs all created beings. Punishment alone protects them. Punishment watches over them while they sleep. The wise declare punishment to be identical to the law. If the king did not, without tiring, inflict punishment on those worthy to be punished, the stronger would roast the weaker like fish on a spit. The whole world is kept in order by punishment, for the guiltless man is hard to find. Even the gods give the enjoyment due from them only if they are tormented by fear of punishment. Where punishment with a black hue and red eye stalks about, destroying sinners, there the subjects are not disturbed, provided that he who inflicts it discerns well." It's not a bad king or a bad system that we have here, but a set of rules for how things should be. The Arthrashtra, that's the name of the document. The Indian treatise on statecraft recommends 18 kinds of torture, with the added recommendation that for particularly serious cases, there should be administered on the same day. The central place of punishment was acknowledged by the Confucianism, the Chinese law of code, describes the instruments to be used to extract evidence.
How did we get from water to torture?
I know. Like, whose project is this? This great public works project. Oh, right. It's for food and agriculture. I remember. Okay. The great cylinders of the Emperor Guido of Mesopotamia, who reigned from CE 2150 to 2125, described how he restored the Temple of Ennui after its neglect had afflicted the land with drought. So extreme was the crisis and the action needed in response that normal life had to be put on hold. In fact, it was turned upside down, a vision of the impossible, the lion lying down with the lamb of Isaiah. He freed the prisoners, he remitted the taxes. A maid was in equality with her mistress. Her mistress did not strike her at all in the face. A servant walked in equality beside his lord. If a servant did wrong, his lord took no further thought thereof. The rod and thorny switch he caused to be laid on one side, and the cudgel to be put away. Even the language of the whip was prohibited. The language of the whip, not the ultimate sanction then, but normal communication. And along with punishment, of course, comes obedience. Among Greek virtue, there was no mention of obedience. In medieval Europe, the knight was committed to loyalty to his lord, but not total submission. But in the big civilizations of the East, obedience was central. In Mesopotamia, the quote-unquote good life was the obedient life. In Confucius' good society, the good subject was the obedient subject. And as for the masses, the small people's Confucius code of honor did not apply at all. Their role was like grass, to bend low in the wind, directed by the threat of corporal punishment. I got to take this call after this, and by the principle of mutualism, which punished the whole family for the disobedience of just one of its members. And your obedience has to be confirmed at all times. If you approached a superior, you had to kowtow, touch the ground with the forehead, and maybe kiss it too. Meeting with the representative of the pharaoh involved lying prone on your belly, and it got lonely because if you were in trouble, no one would dare come to your assistance. The Chinese historian Sima Qian, who differed with his emperor's opinion on the abilities of the defeated general, was sentenced to be castrated in a darkened room. He wrote, "My friend did not come to my assistance. Those who were near and intimate with me did not say a single word in my favor." Into the room. Despite all this, the hydraulic civilizations were, and have remained, remarkably free from criticism. There was a periodic revolution in a sequence of sacrifice and succession as dynasties became corrupt and decadent. The dikes silted up, and the retaining walls decayed. But these kaikaku moments were not challenges to the system itself. On the contrary, they renewed and strengthened it. They were integral to its resilience. As the historian Karl Wittfogel explains, criticism was directed not at the system, but at individual officials. Apart from mystics who teach total withdrawal from the world, these critics aim ultimately at regenerating a system of total power whose fundamental desirability they do not doubt. And the reason was that those societies actually needed their giant construction projects, which in turn needed virtuoso administration. To say that the masters of hydraulic society are great builders is only one way of saying they are great organizers. Was there an alternative? Well, yes, if you had weather for it. You needed regular rainfall. Rainfall, farming, being locally self-sufficient in water, had no role for a central authority to provide it. The authorities can provide other things such as currency, a legal framework, and defense of the borders, but they are not indispensable in the way that governments of a hydraulic civilization are. If a state with rain-fed agriculture fails to carry out its duties, life will go on. If a
hydraulic civilization, huh?
If a hydraulic regime fails, then, in due course, there will be water shortages and or catastrophic floods. Life will not go on. The people who endured that will want an effective government back, at almost any terms. Unlean works. Areas with the rain-fed agriculture are the exception rather than the rule. If it had not been for them, with their freedom to develop the market and their incentive to apply technology, There is no reason to suppose that hydraulic states would have moved on from the autocratic but highly effective and resilient economic structures they had been developing and sustaining for the last 6,000 years. European freedoms, from this point of view, are the exception. As the anthropologist Marvin Harris writes, in anthropological perspective, the emergence of bourgeois parliamentary democracies in the 17th and 18th century Europe was a rare reversal of that descent from freedom to slavery, which had been the main characteristic of the evolution of the state for the 6,000 years. No one who detests the practice of kowtowing and groveling, whose value the pursuit of scientific knowledge of culture and society, who values the right to study, discuss, debate, and criticize, or who believe that society is greater than the state, can afford to mistake the rise of European and American democracies as the normal product of the march towards freedom. As from the Marxian view of history, as the history of class struggle, Wittfogel comments, "Class struggle is the luxury of a multi-centered and open society." This leaves us with some reflections unresolved. First of all, it is the remainder of how critical and how vulnerable water supplies are around the world. In Western Europe, our ability to produce food is good, as the West Wind, along with the higher latitudes, which can generally be relied on not to leave our crops unwatered for more than some 2 months at a time. The fragment of the song of the homesick troubadour appreciates this. Western wind, when thou blow, the smaller rain, down came rain. Christ, if my love were in my arms, and I lay in bed again. Secondly, Lean Logic's local community building self-reliant response suggested for the multiple problems ahead seems to be a natural progress of going back to our roots. It is where we came from, but the big hydraulic states of most of the world did not come from there. Well, originally they did, 6,000 years ago. But even then, it would have been at the level of small settlements of the Iron Age, or the earlier Bronze Age, or even in some places the Stone Age. Farming without irrigation in those areas had to have been on the very modest scale. They do not have rain-fed villages like Windham, Staton, and Laxton as models and inspiration. Thirdly, the government of hydraulic regime would have no trouble in keeping economic output within the limits of zero growth. There is no pressure to keep surplus labor employed. They could simply be directed into mega projects with low survival rates. Or the containing walls of some dikes protecting a floodplain could be breached. Or there was the well-established do-nothing option of allowing the surplus population to starve. Once it had been established, China's population and output fluctuated through a sequence of shocks and recoveries, but remained on the average about the same level of the level for a millennia. That's a steady state economy. And of course, fourthly, this story reminds us to be conscious of some insecurity with regard to our freedoms. The hydraulic civilization model of despotic government travels with conquest and politics. Wittfogel suggests that the Mongol invasion brought it from China to Russia in the 13th century, and that it was faithfully followed by another 7 centuries of Russian rulers, including Lenin and Stalin. Its origins are all about water, but once it is established, a political mindset develops a momentum, whatever the weather. Becoming climacteric, with its energy famine, could supply green authoritarianism with a regrettable opportunity to become reinforced in those parts of the world where armies of workers will again be needed to keep water flowing, and to then extend to those parts which still have the hope of building a future on freedom and self-reliance. We may wonder if we know what we are doing. Our brave and truculent insistence on the local lean autonomy is, in some serious senses, taking on by far the biggest and most autocratic form of resilience that the world has ever known.
I need a synopsis.
Seems like a warning that this local style of water distribution goes well with authoritarian type of government, and that is common, I guess. Does that sound right?
Danger, does that sound right?
That's what I was kind of trying to say.
You know, the thing about the authoritarian style is the authoritarian has the big picture in mind. So they are not one of those spokes on the wheel. They are definitely looking at the whole picture. At least they should be.
Yeah, in the best case scenario.
Right. So, you know, I can see an argument that, you know, the benevolent, you know, perfect authoritarian is better than any other system of government, but impossible because there is no perfect authoritarian.
Unless you're a cybernetic authoritarian, which you have AI-enhanced ethics. Oh yes, I have the latest updates to my ethics patch.
So you say that jokingly, but there is a school of thought that says that you know, humans are perfectible, not just physically, but intellectually and morally.
And immunologically, if you'll have the
Sure.
World Wide Web of immunity to believe.
Alrighty.
I would think that ethics would be most challenging AI problems around.
Yeah, because you would have to gather really qualitative data, and does AI really know how to analyze qualitative data?
I mean, isn't that the plot of so many, you know, media where, oh, the AI decides that we need peace, and so we're just going to kill everyone. So, or we decide that the humans are destroying the earth, so ethically we have to kill every one of them, or something like that.
The blue screen of death of humanity.
Bring on the blue screen. Right.
Well, I like to consider myself in recovery from domestication.
You know, something came up in that article by, what's his name? Is this the one? Yeah, John D. Liu.
Doctor John
yeah.
Deaver.
The Holy Grail of Restoration. There was something in here about humans being wild. Like there was a bit of frisson or resonance with one of the other pieces. The piece that you sent, actually. Where was that? Oh well, I cannot afford to go back through that right now. So let's
Listen, if we can build a fission weapon to destroy the world, surely we can build a fusion community to protect the world and to preserve the world.
But destroying things is so much easier.
Well, it's so much funner. You get to see it like break up and cause all kinds of existential turmoil.
As someone who has built things, I know you can make one mistake and it's just so easy for it to be destroyed. You had to redo the whole thing. No undo with a physical realm, pretty much.
no Control Z.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get involved in some Control Z work in my permaculture landscape design. I'm like, oh my god, what kind of tripping out designer came up with this stupid fucking design? Like, especially when water is involved, because people are usually, they don't even notice the contours of the land. Like, unless you go to like surveying, take a little surveying course.
Do you actually work as a permaculture landscape designer?
Yeah.
Huh.
I trained in Oregon in at the eco village called Lost Valley.
Wow.
They're great. They had very subtle elevation changes in their landscape, but the main designers, they would get these teams of college students to like dig on them. We would, change the elevation slightly.
What is
It's a learning exercise.
What is the oldest project you work on? How far along has like a project? Yeah. What's the longest you've seen a project develop?
So the site that I'm at right now, I've been at for about 15 years.
15 years.
So that's been really an interesting evolution. And mostly
What's the size of this site?
Okay, so the property boundary that my farming partner and I own is about 4,000 square feet, so very small.
Small.
Actually a piece of marginal land from Habitat for Humanity. It's like a neighborhood community garden.
Uh-huh.
And then we have sort of de facto access to property that's owned by the local sewage and water board.
Oh, nice.
So on those parts, we do things that we don't, care if they get bulldozed or mowed or whatever, some administration change, and they decide they want to bulldoze it. We don't get our hearts broken. You know what I mean? But whereas we know we have sort of some stake with the Habitat for Humanity. So really, like, that's like what they call an invisible design structure, where you're designing the legal framework on which the restoration work is happening. Because you could have a really competent ecological design, and then the whole thing implodes through, title. Somebody decides they want to build a house there, and they're like, well, we had built a restoration ecology on this site, and you're building a McMansion? So designing with time stacking in mind has been, really important. So I love that you brought up that question, Parker.
Time stacking?
Time stacking, yeah, you stack the functions through time. And imagine what the evolution of your site is going to look like 100 years out.
I would guess that in Louisiana, with your tropical/subtropical climate, there are so many different things that you can do permaculture-wise. One of my favorite episodes of the Sea Realm podcast was the interview with the authors of those 2 books about forest permaculture. I still have it in my
Dave
Amazon.
Jackies and Eric Tonsmeyer.
Yeah.
Lickety split.
When did you interview them? What year was that?
I first interviewed both of those guys when I was at the Eco Village Training Center. So that was probably 2011, maybe.
Cliff and Jen will take you back. Come on, KML.
And then I went down to Eric Tonsmeyer's place in Holyoke, Massachusetts a couple of years ago, maybe like 3 years ago, I think, and interviewed him there. In fact, there's a video of that. It's like on my YouTube channel. Let's see.
Nice.
I'm going to search for it. Except I don't know how to spell Tonsmeyer.
Oh, distracted from drawing again.
Yeah. All right. Huh. It's probably this one. Anthropogenic Ecosystems. Sea Realm Podcast number 507. That's with Eric Tonsmeyer. That was recorded at his place in his permaculture garden in the backyard of his house. Let's see.
I added it to my wish list on October 9th of 2016. Edible Forest Gardens. And it's still very expensive.
Oh, the book? Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of those ones you got to get from the library and just check it out for 2 weeks and be like, okay, I get that, yeah. Because the libraries usually keep a copy of it within the region, at least if you can do interlibrary loan.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could get a pirate copy. Oh, I didn't say it on the live stream. Oh no, they're gonna lock me up. Shit! Here comes the anti-pirate party.
I wouldn't guess that would be a great thing to pirate. I would.
Dr. Dead Nettles, are you in possession of the following PDFs? Oh, I swear I was pressured into it by celebrity influencer podcaster KMO.
Hey, leave me out of it.
Implicated, as usual.
I never told nobody to steal nothing. All right. Well, I can't find it. It's on my own channel, and I can't find it. Let's see. Maybe if I go to my channel.
Well, in my green authoritarian regime, there's going to be PDF copies of it on everybody's subdermal microchip. You're going to have to read it as you fall asleep. And his punishment for not listening to the Dave Jackies and Eric Tone's My Edible Forest Garden series was swift and brutal. Don't vote for me. That's my presidential pitch.
Yeah, don't vote for me. I'm going to be a tyrant. The streets will run red with the blood of the unbelievers.
The streets will run green with the blood of the non-believers. Oh no, that's just their antifreeze coolant slipping out of their trucks.
Search across your channel. There we go. Let's try that. Zero results. Oh well. All right, back to drawing.
I've seen some stream restoration projects around here.
Nice.
They tend to be quite traumatic to the landscape while they're happening. You have these streams that are really eroded down, so there's just like little mini canyons of, where the water's just rushed through and degraded it. And they had to what they do is they strip it all away, and they big land moving heavy machinery in, and just totally resculpt it and then replant it, and it takes quite a while for it to come back, and it's very expensive to do.
How do they determine which sites they're going to work on first?
Well, it's like if a development is taking an area out, then sometimes they can get them to partially fund restoring another area.
Right.
So that's a situation where it can get funded. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes there's one that I'm interested in, and I should be keeping more track of. There's a school that was built near a park/library near where I live that is going to change the runoff into the park. So I believe they're going to do a stream restoration there. And I'm a little bit afraid of how much damage you're going to be doing in the whole process. But it'll probably be good in the end. It's really sad. This is an elementary school. Politically, everybody's like, "Oh, an elementary school, that's great." But this area was, it had turkeys in it, and it was like a young forest/meadow, very early successionist stage of of landscape, and it was right next to the park, which was older forest, so it kind of worked well together, and it was very sad to see it go.
The March of Progress.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. What did we?
I found lion's mane fungus once where the school stands now. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it looked cool. And now I know I could have eaten it.
You missed it.
And it's supposed to be really good.
For the brain.
Yeah. Do you cultivate any mushrooms, or is it just plants?
Yeah, so one of our partners is a farmer's market vendor, and they call their mushroom company Mycelium Express. And they're trying to focus primarily on mail order, like bags of sawdust spawn for people all over the region. Mm-hmm. But they get a lot of duds, like it gets a little blue mold on it, or it gets a little mildew on it. And so we go and fill up the back of the truck, and then we just use it as our mulch. And occasionally those will fruit, even though they're, technically infected or whatever. You wouldn't want to sell them in a market setting because they would turn blue in someone's refrigerator. But if you're going to cook them that day, it's not a big deal.
That's interesting that their business model is supplying other mushroom growers. I guess they probably grow them themselves, but also I guess they combine it to...
Yeah, they just don't like keeping up with all the misting and whatnot. And the humidity control rooms and the scale at which you would need to do restaurant.
Do you have things that you are... have just harvested or are almost ready to be harvested in your garden now?
Yeah, we just did a bunch of kimchi from some cabbages and some daikon radishes. And we do a weekly food box at the Unitary Universalist Church. So they have a little CSA program out of their commercial kitchen.
Did you put those peppers in the kimchi? Is kimchi a spicy thing?
Yes.
Okay. I did not know that. I knew it was like, fermented and pickled or whatever, but I didn't know it was hot.
It's basically like sauerkraut that you put chili paste on top of.
I don't know why I don't have that. It sounds like something I would be into. You probably have harvest. You can probably have harvesting like all year round down there, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. The summer is kind of like our winter because it gets so goddamn hot that you can't go outside, much less grow anything. So you just huddle inside by the air conditioner and say.
Right. Well, that's what happened with the COVID in the summer. Is it happened in the South more because of all the people huddling indoors, and then as the winter came on, it went north.
Right. Well, if I was an epidemiologist in the year 2021, I'd get myself a huge data set and I'd have a whole lot of fun. If I was an immunologist in the year 2022.
Do you play instruments?
Yeah.
What do you play?
Play the trombone, play the guitar, the banjo, the ukulele, the beatbox.
Wow. Well,
what's it called? Throat singing?
The beatbox and throat singing, I don't know. I wouldn't say that those are instruments.
Okay. Fair enough. The spoons?
Yeah, I mean, that's an instrument.
Cereal.
What is your most... What are you most skilled at?
The spatulas. Are you ready? Let's see. Gotta play the spatulas. Just gonna get this all set up. But I have to take the headphones out. No, I can do it without it. With the. Poor ear. Anybody wearing earbuds is gonna have their ears hurt by those sounds. No, but I like to sing, just to pass the time. I don't think of it as a profession. Although, I did look at my streaming revenue on Spotify. You guys would be so proud. I made $3 last year.
It's not nothing.
Better than $0 on streaming revenue, I guess.
Was it $3 even? Because I would expect it to be like $3 point, zero.
I lied. It was $2.67. But that'll be my delusions of grandeur acting up again. Or as we call them in therapy, dogs are my delusions of grandeur.
Oh, I get it. That's clever. Dogs. Stop.
So when you say "sup dogs," reference to your friends.
Sup, my delusions of grandeur.
I might imagine you to be my friend, but really, the fact that we're so geographically distant in this moment would be very difficult for us to engage in friendship. So you could consider me to be your delusion of grandeur.
Okay.
Or if our age is so too
You're
different.
positioning yourself as grandeur here.
Delusions of grandma. I'll put on some mascara and I'll be your delusions of grandma. I think that was a plot point in this one AI story called Alpha Mart. It was like the last 6,000 Amazon employees were all like running Amazon as if it was like it was StarCraft. They'd have like the different armies of drones delivering packages, and so there was only 6,000 of them. And then when you got your experience points reached 1,000, you'd get promoted to the next Amazon level up in the Amazon management structure. And you would get an artisanal human to tailor your clothes for you. They would just show up and be like, "Oh, I'm here to tailor your clothes now." It was like a house-to-house Etsy, or like the Uberization of Etsy. They come to your house and make your stuff. And then what was the other? Oh, they have these artisanal virtual friends whose personalities are like, like artisanally crafted personalities, like AI. But then because you were so Machiavellian to climb to the ranks of like level 600 Amazon employee, you were so evil that you had to abuse and torture your artificial intelligence friends, and they would resent you for it. But you could program them to forget that you would ever wronged them. But in your heart of hearts, you would know it, and they would sense it in your eyes. Like, oh yes, I know you treat all of your artificial friendships this way. Anyway, it's a really good tale. And it's so weird. It was just written on this anonymous news serve once, and I don't even know the author. It was really good. People do text dumps, and they're like brilliant authors.
I heard that you can, if you have the money, you can get a companion to your specifications now.
A silicon flesh bot?
No, an actual person.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll sign me up.
Like say you're a rich woman executive that used to travel with your husband, but now you've broken up, and you want a guy to travel with sometimes, but don't want to mess around with the dating market. There is a service available. Somebody was just telling me the other day that they were researching it. the existence of this. And the guys, they're referred to as cowboys in this service. And apparently sometimes these guys will go to red carpet events with celebrities and things like that.
Sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, the emotional labor market is really going to get interesting as soon as it's all on blockchain. I mean, it's sort of already happening. They're breaking the MasterCard and Visa off of all the different sex worker sites.
Blockchain. It's sad to hear about your $100,000 laptop, KMO.
No, it's your status symbol.
Yeah.
I bought this back in the 2012s with all of my bitcoins.
Yep. If I'd waited till today, I could have bought a Tesla Model S with it. But
save it for another time. What?
I said if I'd kept that Bitcoin, I could have bought a Tesla Model S today.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Right
I was
on.
thinking that the stock valuation of Tesla is like Bitcoin now. Bitcoin, like, it's just what the value of it doesn't really connect it to anything. It's just what people will buy it for, and I'm thinking that that's what the stock of Tesla is now, more or less. Maybe the stock market in general, just completely disconnected from actual valuation, or mostly.
Welcome to the age of Aquarius. I'll be your value quantification and qualification consultant.
Ben
For a small
says
fee.
David Jackie is sort of local to me. Who is that?
Oh,
I
nice.
think here in Auburn, some people started a permaculture park. The people that did associated with David here and there.
Huh. So it would seem that I have lost track of the chat. Let's see. Let's go.
Oh, you got some people in the chat. I'm gonna check.
Who's got the Blue Jay screaming at him?
Not me.
So it must have been Dangerous Jay.
Oh yeah, we got blue jays out here. It's a problem. You want to see the bird bath?
The link is up there. Ben says, let me in the Zoom if you can.
Ah, all right. Admit. All right.
Greetings, Ben. Oh, connecting to audio.
All right. So blue, dark blue.
Hello.
Greetings, Ben.
Nice
Hello.
yogurt. I thought that was a drum set at first.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. That was a super exciting collection of schmarticles that we had there. Thank you for your contribution.
You feel smarter?
Yeah, that feeling.
On the Sea Realm podcast, a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions.
True that.
That's Black Beauty, right?
It is Black Beauty, yeah. Black Beauty.
I
from
love those Australians. They're my favorite.
back in the day.
I would move to Australia if they didn't have me under travel ban.
Why are you on a travel ban?
Because I'm in the Taliban. Look.
That ain't true.
That ain't true.
Is Parker
Truth doesn't care about your fake facts.
Audio. Yeah.
What did you glean from those articles, Benjamin?
Well, the hydrological civilization, that way to look at civilization, I think is really fruitful. So it was exciting to see that in someone else's words. So I got to read Lean Logic at some point. Have you ever read Rivers of Empire?
Not yet. Rivers of Empire.
It sounds like Parker's talking really quietly in the background.
There's feedback. It's not me. It's
Oh.
feedback somewhere. I wasn't talking.
It's probably me. Hold on.
By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat crying, and Lord,
There.
we wept.
Oh,
We
no,
remember
wrong.
Feedback should be gone by now.
All right.
I was attempting to include my wife in the conversation.
What was that last thing you said? Benjamin, what did you just say?
He said he was attempting to include his wife in the
Oh.
conversation.
Admirable.
Yeah, I was trying to include my wife in the conversation. Oh man, there's a weird delay.
Well, it's a long journey to the Data Collection Center of George G. Meade in Langley, Virginia, where all of the calls are routed. We've only said Ted Kaczynski once in the chat so far.
Yes.
So many data centers around here in Northern Virginia.
I like to shop local when it comes to ubiquitous surveillance.
Oh, newbie mistake. I didn't pause the live feed.
Oh, okay.
You don't need to pause it. You can just mute it.
So I can get a load of your juicy drawing. But I was attempting to ask if Mr. Danger, if you had read Rivers of Empire.
Rivers of Empire?
Or anyone else.
I have not heard of that.
Me neither.
Yeah, that was an exciting one along that, it kind of analyzing civilization through the coercion of water to convert into sustenance and all that. It's by kind of an environmental historian. I think was his name, Donald Worster.
Sounds like an interesting perspective.
Sounds like a good investment
Yeah.
of time. Let's see.
It's too late now, but as far as like putting all the topic of water in one of KMO's live feeds, I could have crammed that one in there. But
One ecological restoration thing that happens nearby here and that I had looked into recently is oyster farming in the Chesapeake. There used to be a huge industry of oysters, but basically they overfished it, and it's a tiny fraction of what it once was. But in the past 10 or 20 years, it started coming back a little bit, and people are they do open water oyster farming and also on reefs. And there's a little bit of conflict between the farmers and the old-fashioned watermen that just go out and get them.
How's that conflict playing out?
What's that?
How is that conflict playing out?
I read about the conflict, but I don't know the motion in it. I just know that the farmers want limits, like the watermen want a certain number. You have to have like 3 oysters per meter in order or more in order to have it farmable, but the farmers want it to be 20 oysters per meter in order for it to be allowed to be farmed.
Right. They want it to last.
Yeah.
One wants it to think longer term, and the others just needs to make some money.
They want to mine.
Maximize
Kids
those
to
yields now.
It's a really hopeful story, so I like following it. Every year the oysters expand. That means the bay is getting cleaner.
And it also does a whole bunch to mitigate the surge of water, because there's more surface area for it to reckon with when it's coming over your silted carrots.
There has been, of course, they've been hit hard by the pandemic because oysters are more typically eaten in restaurants where they're shucked for people. People don't like to buy them and shuck them at home.
The term shuck is used there. It's funny. The same with corn. Somehow they charge 5 times the price because people can't stand shucking it at home. People buy it though.
I enjoy shucking corn.
Yeah.
I enjoy
Yeah,
shucking oysters.
I've never done that.
You got a shucker?
Who's
Yeah,
your shug guy?
I keep it on me at all times in case I need to make a break, shuck somebody.
I have a pair of shucks.
Nunchucks?
Aw shucks.
There you go. Camo picked it up. What I was laying down.
I missed the punchline.
It's
Say it
it's
one more
been
time.
digested. It was a bad setup. I was trying to figure out how to put in shucks as a pun in that. Is that a plural of a shuck?
Good effort.
The thought that counts. Yeah, there's a whole approach there that always seems to cut into growth and feeding people, where you try to just use a little bit less. Like if you take one of the lobster's claws, the other will regenerate back. But if you take the whole lobster, kind of sets the food wealth and ecosystem back more than it can, give back.
Yeah.
Oh,
going back
lobsters
to
are filter fish as well?
the whole tragedy of the commons theme.
I don't know if lobsters filter, but as far as use less for the long term, it's kind of a nifty way. Harvest one, the other regenerates back. The other side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like the salmon. David Montgomery's book on salmon, I think it was called Kingfish. He also wrote The Erosion of Civilization's Dirt, like in the perspective of soil.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was fun. I listened to it, so I don't have notes on that one.
You make notes about the things that you read?
Yeah, I've started to in the past
That's good.
almost year. Yeah, because I found that I would listen to a book and someone would ask me about it and be like, I could give a sentence and all the fun stuff was just gone. I
Yeah.
wanted that more robotic, numeric memory. So it's sort of a blend. I'm a cyborging in that way.
Have you heard about the whole giant salmon farm that is being constructed in Florida?
That sounds nauseating. Is it they have to like, so it's a farm, they put the semen in there and grow them in little squares, it sounds like.
It's a massive project, and it's based in Florida because of the water. It's funded by various people, some Scandinavians and Americans, but they wanna take over a significant percentage of the salmon market with this
Domesticated salmon.
indoor aquaculture project. Yeah. Sort of saying it's, it's not, there's no mercury possible involved because it's all closed. It's more, you can have it reliable. I don't know. It doesn't, it seems like a positive thing to me, even though the size of it is, industrial agriculture like.
Yeah, I think they have to now because the amount that they've harvested, the anadromous fish runs, the wild ones that go out back to the ocean, where it'd be really hard for us to gather that nutrients, and then they bring it back to land just because they want to. It's crazy. Their instinct. The thing that bugs me about that, I guess, is now the food to feed the farm salmon comes from the land that we would need. Maybe there's enough land, maybe there's enough nutrients we can get out of the land to feed everyone, but to have it where it used to, this whole big pump from the ocean to come back once a year, seems like a hard thing to undo, or unfortunate thing to undo.
Well, hopefully it's not a good excuse to have the economics be favorable for that giant copper mine in Alaska over the fishermen. That's been like a long-term fight there between I can't remember the name of the giant mine they're proposing, but the miners and the fishermen.
So the copper mine would ruin the wealth that the fishermen were getting from fishing?
Yes, that's what I think is likely, and that's what the fishermen say. Of course, the miners say, no, it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to put everything exactly back like how I left it. Listen, I'm going to just rearrange the entire mountain, take all the metal out of it, put it right back where I found it, put the sod down. You won't even notice it. The poor little fish will be jumping up on the sod, rolling around on it, enjoying it.
I'm done with the toothpaste. I spit it back in the tube where I got it from.
Right.
The robots would prefer the copper, but the humans probably want to get fed. Good times.
Yeah.
Do you guys know for cyborg fish paste?
What
I'd
about
have to dig
cyborg
through
fish
my
paste?
grandma's journals.
It's 2 parts particulate graphene, 2 parts anchovy, 3 parts Alaska Gulf of Alaska shrimp.
It's that simple.
All right.
Yes. Squirt it into your ecological restoration gland, and you'll be back to cyborg earthworks in no time.
Do you regret what you've done with this live stream yet, KMO?
Nope, I do not. It just would have been silence.
It's I'm sorry. The petroleum the petroleum addicts will go into the sub conference. I apologize.
Alrighty.
You know, the comedian Brian. Oh, damn it! Not Brian Regan. He's a bigger guy, but he had sketches. Voodoo Wop on YouTube. He's like a heavier set comedian from New York City. It's drifted away, but you're sounding like him. He's got a good slideshow spectacular on YouTube. Reminds me of that. Your accent.
Dangerous accent.
Yeah, 2 minutes camo.
Oh, true that. Yeah. It is pitch black.
You're
here.
It's pitch black.
Yeah, it is dark, dark, dark here.
Whereabouts? What side of Baltimore are you headed to?
Let's see. I can put the map up on the screen here. Let's see.
Synchromium 24 says Koala Harris. Laughing my ass off.
Now, how did that come up? Let's see. Where is that? Here we go. Okay. So this will come up on screen for you in a few seconds, but it is a map of the proposed walking tour.
I saw that on the video, but it was too zoomed in to see where kind of it was.
Okay, I'll zoom out a bit. Let's see.
And who's doing the tour?
Static Warp Shell.
Love that name.
Yeah. So there you go. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. It's coming.
I believe you.
Well, I'm going to sign off, y'all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you for the narration and the reading and the suggested reading material.
Yeah, nice chat.
Yeah, see you later, KMO. Bye, Parker. Bye, Ben.
Bye,
Bye.
Danger. All right. Now, where did I put that map? Here we go. Can you see it yet?
Nope.
Weird. What are you seeing on screen?
I'm just seeing. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see it now. Okay. Yeah, you haven't zoomed out yet, though. Can I speed it up?
It should be just a few seconds now.
Yes. So pretty close to downtown. Okay. So just slightly north, but basically very close to the middle of Baltimore.
Near
Okay.
the zoo.
I will continue to be indecisive about
Okay.
whether I'll drive up there
Fair
and
enough.
meet you for at least a couple more days.
No problem. Well,
Maybe I'll sell a large thing.
well, I hope to see you there. But if not, I hope to hear you on future live streams.
Okay.
It's good to get a community of people
All
who
right.
know each other going on these things.
Yeah. 4 people on the audio.
Yeah, amazing. Very easy for me. All right, Parker,
All right. Bye.
Benjamin, see y'all later.
In 2008, California voters approved a ballot measure for almost $10 billion that would match with up to $35 billion federal dollars would build a high-speed rail line that would run up and down the state. But that vote didn't end the debate over high-speed rail. At the end of July of this year, the Fresno County Commissioners voted 3-2 to stop the high-speed rail, citing fears and concerns from citizens, farmers, and ranchers. They were also growing very concerned about ballooning budget forecasts for the train that are bringing the very feasibility of it into serious question. For instance, it has been projected that the ultimate cost to complete the train will be in excess of $65 billion. Interestingly, 100 years ago, there was a similar development-oriented controversy that rattled the state of California, and that controversy centered not around the San Joaquin Valley, but the Owens Valley, that plays roughly 200 miles north of Los Angeles. In 1913, the Owens Valley Aqueduct opened. It was a marvel of engineering, and also fraud, chicanery, lies, and skullduggery. You see, the city of Los Angeles had been growing, adding residents and businesses, even when there was no water to keep up with this growth. Then, Los Angeles Mayor Eaton, a water purveyor himself, realized that there was a large supply in the Owens Valley that could flow mostly by gravity to Los Angeles, where Los Angeles homes, farmers, and factories would reap the benefits of this water. So, using a series of straw men that slowly bought the land and the riparian rights, they worked behind the scenes attempting to not allow anyone to know why they wanted the land. At this time in 1905, the Owens Valley was a charming province of farms, cattle ranches, fruit orchards, and vegetable fields. However, within a few short years of the completion of the aqueduct, all that vanished, destroyed forever as a gigantic public works project was built. Men like Moses Sherman and Isaac Van Nuys were buying land in the San Fernando Valley for less than $25 an acre. Eventually, this land would sell for up to 6 times that, but first it needed a water supply. Again, how to get the citizens to pay for that water supply when hardly anyone was living in the San Fernando Valley? Well, the politicians actually got together and, as they often do, created a crisis and panic that they just happened to have the solution for. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, on whose board sat Moses Sherman, created a shortage of water by pumping the supply directly into the city's sewers. Can you friggin' believe it? I mean, you can't make stuff like this up. The citizens would open their taps to emptiness or just a trickle of water. Desperate, they voted for not just 1, but 2 bonds. In total, almost $27 million, which was a lot of money in that time, of taxpayer money was raised to buy the Owens Valley and build the aqueduct. Although the bond issue specified that only the water would be delivered to the city of Los Angeles, the powers that be found a way around it, having the next city council annex the San Fernando Valley. The politicians and well-connected men like Sherman made millions upon millions on this swindle of the public. These men are now immortalized in the names of cities, towns, and boulevards across the San Fernando Valley, and their dark deeds glossed over by history. The great American satirist Will Rogers commented on the demise of the Owens Valley, saying, 10 years ago, this was a wonderful valley with 250,000 acres of fruit and alfalfa. But Los Angeles had to have more water for its Chamber of Commerce to drink toast to its growth, more water to dilute its orange juice, and more water for geraniums to delight the tourists. While the giant cottonwoods have here died, so now this is a valley of desolation. Today there is another land swindle going on. Another mighty powerhouse of California agriculture is about to have its valley denuded of production by the creation of yet another public improvement that will allow California politicians, unions, and well-connected investors to transform another farming community and make themselves rich in the process. The farmers and citizens who own the land in the San Joaquin Valley around Fresno are experiencing the same kind of unadulterated, open arrogance as those 100 years ago in the Owens Valley faced. Only this time, it's the California High-Speed Rail Authority. The California High-Speed Rail Authority is planning on forcing them to sell their land for the quote-unquote greater good. Some farms, churches, halfway houses, and long-standing community businesses and amenities will be destroyed. Some farms will be cut in half and basically made unfarmable by the rail. The farmers object to this train from and to nowhere, although the farmers are allowed to comment in EIRs and public hearings. The truth be told, in those kangaroo courts, they're simply ignored. What I'm saying here is not based on a paranoia. These forces are hard at work, but not for the greater good. I mean, ask yourself, why are huge train stations being built in the Central Valley? At present, hardly anyone lives there. It makes no sense. That is, of course, unless the plan is to get a whole lot of people to move there in the near future. So let's look at the basics of the high-speed rail's design. It's a train being built to go between Los Angeles and San Francisco. The price difference between the two is expected to be only a few dollars of the price of flying by plane and will take almost twice as long. Not really a choice most business travelers or even tourists are likely to regularly make. Our opinion here at the Center for Progressive Urban Politics is that the train is not about a route between Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's about the route between the Central Valley to either San Francisco and or Los Angeles. The time from the Valley to the Bay Area is about an hour, a commuter norm. This latest scheme is about using taxpayer money to build an infrastructure that will support the destruction of the Central Valley as a place of cultivation and will replace its farming with dense urban development and future population growth. This scheme also dovetails nicely with Proposition 2 that was on the last ballot. You see, Proposition 2 is not about storing water for the present population where that population currently lives. Rather, it's for future populations in the Central Valley. Remember, you heard it here first because it's California's future. The politicians and their donors are building companies as straw men and buying land that they will develop and personally profit immensely from. In closing, understand what is at risk here. The Central Valley, of which the county of Fresno and the San Joaquin Valley are part, is one of the world's most productive agricultural regions. More than 230 crops are grown there on less than 1% of the total farmland of the United States. The Central Valley produces 8% of the nation's agricultural output by value. Virtually all non-tropical crops are grown in the Central Valley, which is the primary source for a number of food products throughout the United States, including tomatoes, almonds, grapes, cotton, apricots, asparagus, to name a few. There are some 6,000 almond growers that produce more than 19 million pounds a year. And that's about 90% of the world's supply of almonds. So that is what will ultimately be destroyed here, America's most vital and profitable farmland. If they create this high-speed commuting lane between Fresno and the Bay Area, within 10 years, the Central Valley will not be able to feed itself, let alone the state or the country. You know, the past is prologue. It's still Chinatown, Jake.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.